Hey guys, welcome to part 4 of What If Naruto Became a One-Man Team. If you enjoy the video then like, share and subscribe and also comment your thoughts as it inspires me to make more such videos, and remember to check out my playlist section for other interesting stories. So let's get started. Chapter 11. Aggravation and Training. Ahaha. Is that your mission today? Cleaning up sewage. How fitting. Loser. The other two, who appeared just as ragged looking as Kiba, looked over and saw what Kiba was laughing at and joined in. Well, Sakura joined in. Sasuke just smirked. So the Dobi finally found a job worth his stature. I'll make sure the maintenance department sends your jumpsuit over right away. To their annoyance, the blonde just ignored them and started to walk away. What's wrong, Baka? Taking some sewer cabbage home to your little whores? I'm sure they'll be thrilled. Naruto froze mid-step. Sakura-san. Unless you want to walk around bald for a while, I suggest you never call Hinata-chan or Haku-chan that again. He turned slowly to the side and fixed his gaze on her. Ice blue orbs met green as he stared at her hard enough to make her shrink behind her teammates. Insult me all you like, I'm used to it, but insult them and I will make your life hell. The ever-arrogant Uchiha scoffed but noticed the box he hadn't really seen before now, making him ponder a bit. The fact that it was locked intrigued him, as anything locked was usually a secret, and any secret the Dobi had should be revealed to him, especially if it could make him stronger. What's in the box, Dobi? Cleaning supplies. Naruto's voice was quick and even, betraying nothing. You're lying. No one locks up cleaning supplies, now tell me what's in the box. Cleaning supplies. He still didn't waver. Sasuke took a threatening step forward, but stopped and smirked as he saw two of his favorite people coming down the street. Kaharu and Homura saw the Uchiha in the street ahead and smiled, then saw who he was talking with and sneered. Good afternoon, Uchiha-sama. You mustn't associate yourself with such savages. Come now and let us talk about your placement in the upcoming Shunin exams. I would love to meet Okado-san, Udatane-san, however this Dobi took it upon himself to take something precious to me. I can't leave until I get it back. Quicker than their ages should have allowed the two elders snapped their heads to the blonde. Seeing the only thing of possible value being the box in his hands, they assumed that must be the object in question. You, boy, you give him that box back this minute. Naruto saw Sasuke smirk at him and bit his tongue. Apologies, counselors, but this is not his. This box belongs to me. It holds my possessions and I am the one holding the key. The only thing I may have taken from the Uchiha would be his pride. You filthy lying brat. Give Uchiha-sama his belongings now or we will take you to the Hokage. Lead the way, he said easily, though with much distaste at their haughty attitude. The two infuriated council members pointed towards the tower and Naruto sighed as he started walking as he began leading two red-faced counselors and a smirking Team 7 through the streets of Konoha, right to the Hokage's office door. Last chance, monster. After this there is no going back. Stealing another person's property is a serious offense. Not even signifying he heard them, Naruto opened the door and walked in. He was met with the smiling face of Hiruzen, but that smile quickly turned serious as the man saw the boy's own expression followed by who was behind him. Hello, Hokage-sama. Your counselors seem to be in a bit of a tight spot and asked to come see you. I escorted them here along with Team 7 as per their request. Naruto took a seat in one of the nearby chairs, setting the box pointedly on his lap. An action that was not missed by anyone in the room. Sarutobi turned to his two advisors. So, what brings you to my office this time? How he wished he was allowed to use earplugs in his job. Hokage-sama, this boy stole Uchiha-sama's possessions and refuses to return them. As this is a matter between two ninja, we decided it should be handled by yourself as per your recent turn around on such matters dictates. Really all they wanted to see was the boy that he held in such high regard be shown as the trash he was, but they still managed to hiss out their distaste at the man for no longer being lenient enough to allow them to exact their punishment themselves. Is this true, Sasuke-kun? Hi, Hokage-san. I was walking with my team past one of the village parks that had been shut down due to a sewage leak. As we passed by, he jumped out and took my box. I was lucky to have Mitokado-san and Udatane-san pass by and see my plight. It was almost scary how the words rolled out of his mouth so easily. Hiruzen was immediately skeptical. Sewage spills were normally taken care of quickly and he would have gotten a notice as soon as it happened and another when it was fixed. What puzzled him more was that there were no active sewer lines near any of the village parks. He turned to Naruto in time to see a wink. Is this true, Naruto-kun? Of course not, Hokage-sama. The boy is obviously lying, Hiruzen. I believe I was talking to Naruto-kun Homura, not you. Now I expect silence until he is finished with his side of the story. Continue, Naruto. He glared at his advisors, daring them to speak out again. I was finishing my mission of cleaning up what was left of a sewage leak when I locked up my cleaning supplies and headed out to go home. Team 7 happened to be passing by and decided to make some jokes about my mission, but that stopped when Sasuke-san noticed the box in my arms after Sakura-san pointed it out by saying it was a gift for my roommates. When I told him it was cleaning supplies, he called me a liar and asked me again. I told him the same thing, and that's when the counselors showed up. He told them it was his box, and when I refused to hand it over, well, here we are. The stress on what was in the box wasn't lost on the old man as he quirked an eyebrow. May I see the box, Naruto-kun? Naruto stood and set the box on the Hokage's desk. Tell me, Sasuke-kun, what exactly is inside the box? Sasuke wavered for a minute. He was so certain that the box would be handed over that he hadn't given it a thought. His mind worked quickly though, and he gave a devious smirk. Even if the Dobi was telling the truth, he would still do anything he could to get one up on him. Cleaning supplies. Everyone was surprised at his answer except Naruto, who just smirked. Well then, would you mind opening it up so we can see? I can't, he stole the key too. Naruto fished the key out of his pocket and fearlessly tossed it to Sasuke. Go ahead, Sasuke-chan. Unlock your cleaning supplies. Sasuke confidently walked over to the box. Putting the key in the hole, he gave a twist and heard the satisfying click as the lock was released. Grasping the sides of the lid, he lifted it and was puzzled when the whole box lifted off the desk. Must be stuck. He shook it a few times trying to get it open but failed miserably. What's the matter, Sasuke-chan? Is the box too strong for you? What did you do, Dobi? What do you mean, what did I do? It's your box, remember? Sasuke just gritted his teeth. Maybe if you deactivated the security seal you put on it to keep your cleaning supplies from getting stolen, you would be able to open it easier. Again he winked at the Hokage, who was trying his hardest not to laugh. Sasuke looked all over the box but for the life of him couldn't see a single seal. He slammed the box down on the desk, causing a few pens to clatter to the floor. Open it, Dobi. But it's your box. Shouldn't you open it? Naruto himself was close to cracking up. I said open it. Sasuke pulled out a kunai and got in a fighting stance. Uchiha Sasuke. There will be no fighting in my office. If you don't put that weapon away at once, I will have you thrown in a cell for threatening a fellow Konoha ninja. You're already on very thin ice with me, so don't try my patience. The Hokage scowled at the boy, who returned his glare before replacing the kunai in his pouch. Apologies, Hokage-san. I am later getting home than I intended, so my emotions are agitated. I ask that he remove the seal he obviously placed on my box of cleaning supplies so that we can prove he's a thief and I can get home. Sarutobi just rolled his eyes and looked at Naruto. Naruto-kun, will you please remove the seal? Naruto took a piece of paper out of his pouch and swiped it over the lid of the box. An intricate seal array came into view that spread across the entire box, covering every side and even seeming to go inside the box as well as under the locking mechanism. He turned the hinged side away from the Hokage, so that it would open in such a way that the others couldn't see the contents, and motioned for him to open the box. The room's occupants waited with bated breath as the Hokage lifted the lid and looked at the contents of the box. He quickly snapped the lid shut and glared at the Uchiha, his teammates as well as the two advisors. Uchiha Sasuke, you will leave this room immediately along with your team. Count yourself lucky that I don't have you arrested for attempted theft, but I assure you if this happens again I will not hesitate to do so. They were shocked. But Hokage-sama, what about Uchiha-sama's possessions? I'm sure he will find all his cleaning supplies safe and sound at his house where he no doubt left them. May we ask what is in the box, Hokage-sama? Sakura inquired. Not cleaning supplies. So Naruto Baka lied. He didn't know what was in the box either. He probably stole it from someone else. If there is anything useful in there, it should go to Sasuke-kun. He deserves it more than anyone. Haruno-san. I simply used one of the most valuable tools in a ninja's arsenal. Hokage-sama understood this when I let him know. I knew there weren't cleaning supplies in the box, as I am the one that filled the box. What is inside is for my eyes, and the eyes of those I trust only. That is why it was sealed and locked. Not even looking, he resealed the box and clicked the lock shut. Sasuke smirked as he held up the key to the lock for Naruto to see. Naruto, though, just held up a half-ram seal and said, "Dizorobu." Immediately the key turned to dust and Naruto pulled another one out of his jacket. To show to the once again furious Uchiha. Before the boy could attack again, though, he was reminded of his orders. "Uchiha Sasuke, you were ordered to remove yourself from this room. If you do not do so, I will be forced to assume insubordination." With a snarl, Sasuke glared between the Hokage and Naruto before stalking out of the room. Followed by the rest of Team 7 and the advisors, all of whom sent their own glares at the boy who had once again slipped away unharmed. "Sorry about that, Hokage Gigi. I tried to convince them earlier, but some people are just too set in their ways, especially when it involves me, or the Tem. Look at the bright side though. At least Team 7 is starting to try to work together. I have to say though, their clothes don't look nearly ragged enough to have gone through much punishment. Pity." Sarutobi chuckled. No matter how dire the situation, the boy always seemed to find a way to make him smile. "Don't worry, Kakashi is probably just giving them a small break between their chores. I'm sure they will look even worse for the wear later. Go on, Naruto-kun. I'm sure you had a destination for all of this, and I'd hate to keep you from it any longer. Besides, I have to see how the Uchiha's mental examinations are going. From what I saw, we may need to double-check everything. Thanks, Gigi-san. Haku-chan is probably already at the gate wondering where I am. If I don't hurry back, we're going to end up with spoiled food, and I'll never hear the end of that." He bowed and left the office after grabbing his box and headed home. One thing about that Team 7, they were an endless source of aggravation and amusement, that was for certain. His assumption was proven correct as he found Haku waiting outside the gate with a bunch of bags, and surprisingly Hinata was there as well. Unfortunately, it seemed the crowd from the Hokage's office just happened to be traveling this route to get wherever they were headed, advisors included. Both sides seemed to be at a standoff as he walked over to them, coughing loudly when he was right behind them. "May I ask what the occasion is that Team 7 and 2 advisors would see fit to stare down my girlfriends in front of my house? Don't you dare talk to us like that, brat, and how dare you call this your house? This is the house of Yondaime-sama, and only Sandaime-sama has the rights to enter here." Well, that was true until recently. You see, he decided to open this place up for purchase and I just so happened to be there when he did. I bought it up immediately and now it's mine. If you don't believe me, we can go see Hokage-sama again, but I don't think you want to be embarrassed in front of him twice in one day. Now, if you don't mind, we would like to get our things inside before the food spoils. He pushed through them rather rudely and made his way to the gate. He unlocked it and let the 2 girls in ahead of him. He was about to walk through himself when he was sucker punched from behind and ended up crashing into his front yard. He got up slowly as he heard footsteps rushing towards him. He could see Haku and Hinata rushing towards him from the opposite side, but it wasn't them he was looking at. In the reflection of the house's front window, he could see Team 7 rushing through the gate, readying attacks, heading straight at him. Behind them, the 2 advisors turned their backs on the scene, clearly not caring what happened to the boy. They were too slow though, all of them. In a blur of motion, 3 kunai thrown by Sasuke were cut to the side, and in a fluid set of movements 3 genin were sent flying backwards onto the path. He advanced on them slowly as they began to get up while holding their stomachs. "You try to frame me and steal my property, then you attack my back in front of my own home. You trespass without permission and assault me 3-on-1. You are not ninja, you are no better than brawlers. Get up." They had made it to their hands and knees, but were helped up as Naruto kicked each of them in the chest from the side, then clipped their legs with his heel, forcing them upright. They landed unsteadily on their feet, dazed but now standing. Run. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. One that two of them were smart enough to follow under his icy glare. Sakura and Kiba half ran half limped out into the street before collapsing again, causing Koharu and Homura to turn at the clamor. What they saw both frightened and infuriated them. Two members of Team 7 lay on their sides holding their stomachs while the Uchiha stood unsteadily glaring at the bane of Konoha. They attempted to enter the gate but were forced back by the sheer amount of killing intent along with a thin sheet of ice forming a barrier. Your teammates made the right choice, Tem. Too bad for you. My teammates are weak and pathetic. No, your teammates are smart. Allow me to show you the door. In another blur of motion, Sasuke was sent flying backwards right through the ice and between the two stunned advisors before stopping when he hit the building on the opposite side of the street. Naruto stayed in the same position as when his attack connected as he let out a slow breath. Feet spread one behind the other, bent at the waist, arms even and fists out in front of him. It had been an extremely powerful two-handed frontal attack that none of them had seen happen. Calmly he walked to the gate, closing and locking it, not once taking his eyes off the two stunned elders until he was finished. Then, without a word, he turned and went inside the house. Snapping out of their dazes first, Haku and Hinata exchanged a look before gathering the bags they dropped and rushing inside, slamming the door behind them. An action that brought Homura and Koharu out of their dazes. They exchanged glances before their faces turned from shock to angry, and they helped a semi-conscious Sasuke up before walking him to the hospital on their way to the Hokage Tower for the second time that day. Sakura and Kiba were forced to make it to the hospital on their own, for once accepting each other's help as they used each other for support. Luckily for him, Akamaru had been at Kiba's side when Naruto retaliated and had not been given an attack command by his partner yet, so he was uninjured, but he still whined at Kiba's now rather obvious stupidity. Inside the house, the three residents unpacked the bags in silence as they put the food away. Once that was done, Naruto disappeared into the backyard, leaving the two girls to follow. They found him in the meditation area already trying to relax. Rather than question him, them joined him as the three sat in silence, attempting to ease their minds. Both girls were too agitated though to stay still for long, so they settled for cleaning up the area a bit, glancing at the blonde every now and then in concern. It would be hours until he moved, and the two would make numerous trips between the house and their boyfriend to stretch their legs. Hinata was the most surprised as she had never seen Naruto stay in one place for so long unless he was asleep. When he finally did open his eyes though, they were both caught off guard as he acted just like normal. Good afternoon, ladies. He leaned over, kissing each of them. How was your day? Yup, this was their Naruto. The one who always worried about others over himself. Naruto-kun, what happened? You seemed awfully angry. Sorry if I scared you. The Tem is just getting on my nerves a lot more lately, and now he has the council elders following him around like lost puppies. I'm willing to bet that they're the reason he isn't in chains right now. If they give you trouble again, let me know, by any means necessary. I am afraid that what I just did isn't going to end well for any of us, and if I could I would escort you both around myself, but we know that can't happen. He got up and they walked back to the house. So, how were your mornings? I just got groceries, so not too exciting until I got home. Haku looked to Hinata waiting for her reply. Anyo. Naruto-kun, I have a favor to ask. Naruto turned to her with an unasked question in his eyes. Anyo. Kurenai-sensei is a genjutsu specialist, and, well, she knows some ninjutsu and taijutsu, but I don't feel like she will be able to teach my team very well in certain aspects. I am more used to taijutsu. Shino-san has his bugs, and Harem-san sticks mostly to ninjutsu and is trying to learn kenjutsu. Naruto waited patiently for her to finish. I was wondering if you would be able to train us. His eyes widened. This wasn't something he'd counted on. He had expected something more along the lines of him finding her someone to train with, not training them himself. Hinata-chan, I'm not exactly used to teaching. Wouldn't Kurenai-san be angry if someone else were to teach her students? I mean, I'm only a genin too. Anyo. Kurenai-sensei was the one who suggested that we find someone to teach us in what we needed to learn, while she would teach us what she could in the mornings. So I kinda brought you up to Harem-san and Shino-san. They said they would think it over, and Kurenai-sensei didn't seem too put out by the suggestion even if they were all a bit skeptical. Kurenai-sensei has us signed up for the Chunin exams and I don't want to go in them as weak as I am now. She waited nervously as they watched him debate it in his head. First of all, Hinata-chan, you are not weak, so I don't ever want you to think that about yourself again. Both of the girls were shocked at the sternness of his tone, but eased a little when his eyes softened. If you feel I am worthy of teaching you, then I will try to do so, but I also have to train myself and Haku, so my time with each of you will be limited. It won't be easy though. There are only about 3 weeks left until the exams, so I will be pushing you all extremely hard. Tell them tomorrow that they will come here in the afternoons if they want to train with me, but if they aren't serious about getting stronger, then they shouldn't even bother showing up. My training was, and will be a lot harsher than what we went through at the academy. He then sighed to himself. I'm going to need more supplies. Picking his box up from where he left it on the kitchen table, he made his way to the basement and into the library with 2 curious girls following him. What's in the box, Naruto-kun? Haku asked as she peeked over his shoulder. My personal collection. Well, part of it anyway. You will be welcome to use almost anything in here and supply yourself as you need as often as you like. We will also use these to train. As he was talking, he started unsealing scrolls, quickly organizing them on the bare shelves. The 2 ladies' eyes widened seeing the vast number of jutsu being laid out. Naruto-kun, where did you get all of this? He turned to them, scratching the back of his head. Well, I've kinda been collecting them for a long time. Let's just say they were no longer of use to those that held them, okay? It was obvious that he didn't want to divulge all of his sources, so they left it at that despite their curiosity. Deciding the least they could do was help, they soon had a bit of a chain going on with Naruto unsealing scrolls as the 2 girls set them on shelves. They separated them by elements so it wouldn't be a complete mess later. Luckily for them, Naruto's parents must have had the same thought, as most of the racks were already labeled. Naruto soon overwhelmed them though, as he could unseal scrolls much faster than they could place them on shelves, and after a while they were working up a bit of a sweat, trying in vain to keep up. Naruto set down the current, now empty, scroll that he had been working on. Taking out the next few scrolls, they groaned at the aspect of the small mountain beside them growing, but instead of unsealing these, he turned and placed them on an unlabeled rack before closing the box and turning to them. The rest of this is going up in the office. I'm going to go get some more supplies after I put these up there. Feel free to take a break if you need to. I should be back in less than a half hour, unless the elders or Team Tem decide to grace me with their presence again. They nodded, a little too tired to talk as he made his way up the steps. As soon as he was out of sight, they mock collapsed. I can't believe he has more. Where did he get all of this? Hinata looked at their handiwork thus far, and though the shelves were far from full, it was still an impressive library. Haku was more interested in the scrolls he hadn't unsealed and crawled over to them, inspecting each as her smile grew and she laughed, earning a confused look from the pale-eyed girl. What's so funny, Haku-chan? I know where he got at least some of this collection from. When we were on the mission at Wave, after he freed me, we took out a lot of mercenaries. These, I'm willing to bet, are some of their weapons. See, each one is labeled as a type of weapon. The only troubling thing is that, unless we took out a lot more thugs than I thought, he has far too many to cover what he would have gotten from them. The only thing I do know is he's been a collector for a long, long time. Both girls went over the scrolls out of curiosity, seeing what weapons they contained. The variety alone shocked them before the quantity did. He even had weapons that weren't normally from this portion of the elemental nations and others that were not normally wielded by ninja. Once they had satisfied their curiosity on the weapons scrolls, they got back to the remaining pile of scrolls and started shelving them again. It was a bit more relaxed than previously without the blonde to pace them. Almost exactly a half hour later, their girl talk was interrupted as they heard footsteps above them as the front door closed. They had to admit it was a little creepy since they couldn't see who it was. Only Naruto had a key though, so they weren't worried. It gave them a small thrill instead as they followed the footsteps across the ceiling as they made their way around the first floor. They could tell he stopped in the office first, but they soon started getting nervous at the prospect of stacking more scrolls as the footsteps made their way to the cellar door. Naruto soon revealed himself now carrying 2 boxes, much to their dismay. He smiled broadly at their looks, laughing at them a little on the inside. Don't worry, it's mostly just more weapons. He tried to ease their minds, but it didn't do much as they registered the word, mostly. Mostly out of 2 boxes could still mean more than they already had done. Grumbling a little, they set back to work and soon were once again swamped in scrolls as Naruto easily sped through unsealing all he had brought. A large stack of scrolls now sat in the middle aisle of the room as they slowly filled in the racks from the front to the back. For ease of movement, it was silently agreed that they'd just fill in the sections as they got to them, causing the pile to shift every now and then as scrolls were moved out of the way. Once again they were surprised at the variety as foreign jutsu were revealed. Most surprising of all though was when Hinata found some clan-specific techniques. Including some from her own former clan. She didn't want to think her boyfriend was a thief, but clan jutsu were normally closely guarded secrets. To have such a vast quantity of them was disturbing to say the least. Naruto-kun, why do you have Juken scrolls? She held out a small stack towards him as he took a break from his sorting of the weapons scrolls to look at her. The trash. It was a simple answer, but he hadn't even blinked. You found clan secrets in the garbage. How? Well, eventually scrolls start to get old, so they tend to be rewritten every few years and the old ones are disposed of. Some clans burn them or bury them. The Naras have a ceremony to completely destroy them. The Aburame pile them up and have their bugs eat them. Other clans are less careful and rely on the Konoha maintenance department to dispose of their family secrets. Keep looking, there are a lot more in there. Hyuga scrolls, Yamanaka scrolls, Akamichi, and even Uchiha. Bet Tem would be pissed if he found out I had those. There are no laws that say you can't take someone's trash as your own. Hell, the maintenance guys even encourage it sometimes, less for them to haul around. He gave a shrug and turned around again before realizing he'd forgotten something. Haku-chan, you'll probably find 1 or 2 that you might want to take a close look at. A while ago we must have had a family member of yours here for the Chunin exams. They're in pretty bad shape, but I'm pretty sure they have Hyoden stuff in them. Neither missed Haku's wide eyes as she looked at the wall of scrolls in front of them. Eyes searching, she looked for the most dilapidated scrolls in the stack. Due to the stack being 3 scrolls wide, there were many she couldn't see, but she already saw some that were worse for wear and she dove into the scrolls with renewed energy as she threw them into their spots on the racks. As soon as Naruto was done with the weapons, he joined in from the other side as all 3 of them worked the pile lower and lower. To her it seemed like hours as her targets slowly revealed themselves. Uchiha, Hyuga, Kagaya, Senju, Yamanaka, Hyuga. Wait, I'm looking at clan scrolls. My family wasn't really a clan, we were far too few and spread out for that. She began searching again, but the pile was dwindling fast with the 3 of them working on it. Tears started to sting at the corners of her eyes as she frantically began to toss scrolls to the side, not even bothering to put them on the shelf anymore. Where? She couldn't help herself as tears began to fall. She was so close to having part of her family back, yet she couldn't find it. A hand suddenly appeared in front of her holding something. The waster in her eyes made it too blurry to make out what it said, so she looked up pleadingly to the one offering it. Naruto was smiling down at her as she made out Hinata walking up behind him with something in her hand as well. Naruto turned to her and saw what she held, then turned back to Haku. They're right here, Haku-chan. They're right here. He put a hand on her head, stroking her hair gently as she shakily touched her only known bond to her family. Be careful, they're fragile. If you want, I'll copy them to another scroll later. She tenderly took the scroll from him and read the label. History of the Hyoden. She opened it and the first thing she saw along the cracked parchment caused her to collapse into him, sending scrolls flying in various directions. Tears openly flowed as she cried out and hugged him tightly. The scroll lay all but forgotten nearby as her emotions drowned out any thought. Hinata picked the scroll up, curious at what had sent her friend into such a fit. The first section displayed a family tree. She followed the splits down to the last lines. To the far left must have been the person's family who carried the scroll, as one name was circled and the pair connected to it were sub-labeled Chichiyu and Hahao. Reading across, she soon found a name she recognized on a nearby branch. Amagawa Haku, Idoko. She set the scroll down and crawled over to Haku. She whispered in the girl's ear just loud enough for Naruto to hear. Congratulations, Amagawa-chan. They spent the next hour rocking her until she fell asleep in their arms, emotionally exhausted. Naruto picked her up and took her to her room while Hinata followed behind with the scrolls. After tucking her in, they quietly left to finish up in the library. They had quite the mess to clean up from the frantic search, but they would do it with a smile, knowing that their family member no longer had to use the name of the man that killed her parents. She was finally completely free of him. It would be a couple hours until a red-eyed Haku came back downstairs, and they couldn't be sure if she'd read any more of her scrolls, but they weren't about to pry. Finding out such details about your life was bound to be a shocking event for most people, so they settled for hugging her gently as they led her to the kitchen where their first, real, home-cooked meal waited. It was nothing fancy since Hinata didn't really do much cooking at the Hyuga Manor and Naruto mainly ate quick meals, but between the two of them they managed to throw together something half-decent. From the look on Haku's face, she'd tasted better. No doubt being with a missing nin on the run made one adapt to relying on one's own abilities more. She didn't complain though. They were finally eating together in their house. No glares to be sent their way. No loud-mouthed, close-minded people to yell at them. Just the peaceful company of each other. After dinner, Naruto disappeared into the office, which was pretty much silently agreed upon as being his by now, since it was his house no matter how much he said it was theirs too. They had enough room in their bedrooms anyway, so it didn't bother them. They wouldn't have been able to find a reason for another room anyway, but Naruto on the other hand had no troubles whatsoever. One thing he liked about the office was that there was plenty of workspace. Minato had been known to be a seal master, and as such there were seal-making supplies everywhere. High-quality brushes, a decent stock of parchment. The only thing that didn't seem to resist the calling of time was the ink, which had separated too much to be of much use. He had his own ink anyhow, so that was all right, but having so much workspace. Now that was something he could use. There was a large desk in the center of the room with a long counter behind it that wound around both walls. The only wall not sporting a surface was the one with the doorway. Under all of the counters were cabinets, along with a couple on the walls. Where there was empty space, Sumi-e paintings filled in the gaps, making Naruto think a bit. I wonder if I could use my sealing techniques to make paintings. I'm already halfway there in some cases. He decided he would have to try his hand at painting if he ever got some free time. For now though, he had work to do. If all of Team 8 was going to come to him for training, he would need to figure out just how to help them. Over the next few hours, Hinata and Haku would stop in at various times to give their input on what he could do or bring him a snack or something to drink. They were always thanked and smiled at, sometimes kissed, before he would get back to work. The only time they stayed for more than a few minutes was towards the end of the night when he started to work on seals. Like the council before them, they were mesmerized at his work. They kept going from dazed stares to amazement at the intricacy and care he gave to each one. The most surprising part, aside from making one seal into many, was that he never stopped. Each seal seemed to be created in one long fluid motion, then a sudden stop before he would finalize it or sealed something into it before continuing his brush strokes. Whenever they would ask him what a seal was for, he would simply tell them they would find out soon enough and continue on with his next seal, never breaking his pace. When he had finally set aside his last finished sheet for the time being and stretched, they were astonished by just how long they had been watching him. Naruto-kun, that was beautiful. Hey. Thank you, Hinata-chan, but it's late now and I think we could all use some sleep. We have a long day tomorrow, especially you two, and we'll need all the energy we can get. I have a feeling after the day ends tomorrow you're going to hate me a little bit. We could never hate you, Naruto-kun. Save that thought for after tomorrow is over. They got a little nervous at the comment, but shrugged it off. They loved him, so it didn't matter what kind of training they were going to go through. They would support it. With a kiss goodnight, they left the office and went to their separate rooms. Naruto fell asleep easily while the other two would be up thinking about what kind of schedule he could have set up for them. Sure, he thanked them for their suggestions, but not once did he say that he was definitely going to use them, nor did he give away any of his own ideas. Eventually, though, their exhaustion, both mentally and physically, won out and they passed into dreams of growing stronger than they ever previously imagined. The next morning, Naruto gave the first half of the day to Haku for her to go through her family scrolls, which she was more than happy to do. Meanwhile, Naruto was back in his office finalizing the training schedules for the small group he would be training. It was taking longer than he had hoped, but he had to make sure that he found something they wanted to learn and made sure he pounded it into them. It would be great if they all wanted to learn the same thing, but chances of that were slim, probably closer to none. Hinata had already told him of two completely different people. Herself and Harem. Hinata would be mainly after taijutsu while her teammate was looking ninjutsu and possibly kenjutsu training, but then he also wanted to introduce them to other aspects to see if they were interested in some other fields as well. Hinata and Shino were so used to their clan jutsu that they may not have been exposed to much of anything else, and therefore may not know if they would like something else if they had tried it. A few things they would be working on though would be strength, speed and trapping, as those were things that would need to be covered no matter what they wanted to train in. As he was working, he could see Haku out in the yard practicing something, but apparently not having much luck with whatever it was. He could tell she was frustrated, but she wasn't giving up, and that was something to admire. There were too many ninja who would find something difficult and just move on to the next thing. Sure, they still ended up with a decent amount of skills, but if they had taken the time to learn that one difficult jutsu, or that one tough taijutsu move, it could have made the rest of their training that much easier. Eventually it would pay off, and the training methods they learned to use to learn the difficult skills would be used towards learning even more challenging skills that would make them even stronger. Getting enough of a training schedule to last a good while, possibly even longer than the exams depending on how fast they learned and how motivated they were, he decided a break was in order. Looking back out to Haku, he saw her still struggling on the same seals she had been previously. He felt bad leaving her learning on her own, but she used a bloodline he didn't have. Logically, only another Hyoten user could help her, but what could it hurt to try? Grabbing some drinks, he made his way over to her and noticed the sweat on her brow as small veins bulged at her temples and a grimace creased her face. He may not be able to help her with her jutsu, but he could at least distract her enough to calm her down. Hey Haku-chan, how about a break? Can't. Too close. Her eyes were half-lidded, but he could see the determination in them. Right. Come on, let's go. Despite her protests, Naruto handed the drinks to a clone as he picked her up and dragged her over to the meditation area. He sat her down and handed her the glass of water, but she set it aside and stood back up. Need to keep going. Naruto just shook his head at her. As she tried to stagger out of the area, he grabbed her from behind and sat down with her in his lap. What you need to do is take a break. If you keep going like you are, you'll end up in the hospital from chakra exhaustion. He picked up her glass and put it back into her hand forcefully. Drink. I'm not thirsty. It wasn't a suggestion. He held her gaze when she glared back at him, letting her know that he was dead serious. After a minute, she gave up and slumped into him, pouting as she drank the cool liquid. If you get tired or frustrated, you need to take a break. Otherwise, you are just going to get more frustrated as you wear yourself into a vegetative state. She paused momentarily in her drinking. This is how I've always trained, though. And who was it that taught you how to train like that? He felt her tense. He knew exactly who it was, and he knew what he said would hurt her, but he had to break her of that habit. He had nothing but ill intentions for you, which is why he worked you to near death just to get what he wanted faster, even at the cost of your health. Haku lowered her head in defeat. Then what am I supposed to do? Laze around and let my family's techniques sit there, forgotten? I owe it to their memory to push forward. Naruto took her now empty glass and set it to the side, but when she moved to get up, he kept his grip on her. What you're supposed to do is honor their memory by becoming what you were supposed to, not what you think they would want you to become. He moved his hands to her shoulders and began to rub them, earning slight moans in response as her tight muscles were worked loose. If you push too hard though you risk burning yourself out, and that is something I highly doubt they would like, and I know I wouldn't. No jutsu is worth ending your career before it starts. Haku was torn though. It was hard to hear that the way you've always done something was wrong. She knew it was wrong, and she could feel it was wrong, but she still kept doing it out of habit. Why did she keep doing it? Kami, that feels good. How did Naruto know how she should train? Shouldn't the way she trains be unique to her? Where did he learn how to give a massage? A few minutes rest couldn't hurt, could it? Soon Haku was asleep in his lap as Naruto kept massaging her stress away. He smiled as she leaned back into him, dozing lightly and finally relaxing. It was this scene, about an hour later, that got rather rudely interrupted as a small swarm of insects began to gather around Naruto's head. He didn't need to look at them to know exactly what they were or who sent them. All right. Let him know I'll be there in a minute. As the insects flew off, he did his best to lay Haku down gently. She didn't seem to want to let him go though, so he removed his shirt that she was gripping tightly and let her hold onto it, which she happily snuggled into, leaving him in only a tight mesh undershirt. He debated making a quick stop to get another shirt, but shrugged it off before heading to the front gate to let in his company for the day. Naruto was pleasantly surprised when he got to the front gate. He was expecting the three genin, but he didn't think their sensei would show up too. Kurenai-san, I didn't expect to see you here as well. What? You thought I would leave my students to a genin without at least seeing how he intends to train them? She smirked at the boy who would think so highly of himself. Sure, she heard how good he had handled himself, as Kakashi raved about him often enough when the Jonin sensei would hang out, but he was still just a genin. I have to make sure my students get adequate training if they are going to make it through the exams. So if you don't train them properly, then I will make sure they find someone who will. Naruto cocked an eyebrow at her. So she thinks me incapable of making them stronger. Does she think I'm weak myself? He ushered them inside the gate before closing and locking it behind them, noting the shadows they seemed to have gained on the way there. He brushed it off though. Even if someone was following them, there was little they could do from outside. The walls of his estate were tall and he had already set up many traps, so he kept his mind on his current entertainment. The three who had never really been inside the property were looking around appreciatively as they made their way around the house to the backyard. Kurenai-san, if you don't mind me asking, what makes you think me incapable of training your students? Well, the fact that you were not long ago an academy student yourself may play a small part in it. I have heard of some of your exploits, and no offense, but you can't believe everything you hear. You are the Genjutsu mistress of Konoha, also known as the Ice Queen of Konoha. You are the Jonin instructor of Team 8, best friend as Anko Midarashi. You often accompany her to the dango shop for a quick snack. You are very strong in Genjutsu as it is your main passion, but because of spending so much time on it you are subpar in Taijutsu and Ninjutsu for your rank. You use a kunai to kill a target if they aren't completely overcome by a Genjutsu itself, but other than that you have no remarkable Kenjutsu skills. Please, stop me if my information is incorrect at any point. Kurenai was almost speechless. Here was a boy the same age as her team, yet he pinned her so easily. She scowled at him. And just where did you get so much information about me? Some of those details are not supposed to be public knowledge. I keep my ears open. You seem to have an awful lot of Chunin and Jonin admirers. They should learn to keep their mouths shut, but then that's what you get for showcasing your skills, I suppose. As her team winced, Kurenai was starting to get pissed. Oh, so now you're the expert. I think you need to be knocked down a few pegs. She got into her taijutsu stance, which sadly was still academy style, though she modified it slightly to suit her agility and made it more fluid. Tell me what good information is when you're outclassed. I will make a deal with you, Kurenai-san. If you can beat me, I'll let you have your say in who trains your team. Deal. You don't want to know what happens if I beat you. I'm a Jonin for a reason. I don't think I have to worry about your petty fantasies. So be it. He shuffled his feet a bit, getting ready for her. Just like everyone else. Underestimate the genin. She did a few hand signs and hit him with one of her mid-level genjutsu, Megan. Kokoni Arazu no Jutsu. He stood there completely still. The only sign that anything had happened was a quick jerk when the jutsu hit him. Kurenai smiled and sauntered over. Kurenai-sensei, what did you do to Naruto-kun? Hinata was worried about her boyfriend. Don't worry, he just thinks we're still staring each other down. She bent down, putting her face inches from his and whispered to him. Isn't that right, Naruto-kun? You don't even know what I'm saying to you right now. You're probably too busy looking at me, and having impure thoughts, aren't you, you little pervert? She smirked at her little victory as her neck started to itch. Bringing her hand up to scratch the annoying feeling, she froze as she felt the unmistakable chill of metal at her fingertips. Naruto blinked and smiled at her. That was a nice attempt, Kurenai-san. Now about our little bet. He didn't get to finish as Kurenai snarled and jumped back. Rushing through hand signs, she called out her next attack. Megan. Narukumi no Jutsu. Her team watched in horror as Naruto began to scream and shake. They looked to their teacher, who seemed to have a sadistic grin that they had never seen before. You see, brat. If I don't hold back, then you get burned way too easily. She listened to the boys' screams as if they were music in her ears. The pitch change, the small gurgles, the pants for breath before laughter. Wow. That one was pretty good, Kurenai-san, but it's too bad you didn't finish it when you had the chance. Now it's too late. They saw a small glow around his wrists and feet before he suddenly vanished. Once again Kurenai felt that familiar itching, but this time she didn't have to move her hands to know what it was. One kunai was at her neck just inside the collarbone, the other was at her sternum. You see, if you give the enemy even 1 second to think, you will be giving them 1 second to come up with a plan. Sometimes 1 second is more than someone needs. Once again she got away. This time by ducking and rolling to the side. As she came up, her grin was gone, and in its place was a snarl that had seldom been seen on the usually calm woman. You should listen to your own advice. Megan. Jubaku Satsu. Kurenai's snarl turned into a look of shock as she once again had a kunai against her. How? Congratulations, Kurenai-san, you made me take it up a notch. He pointed to where he had been for Kurenai to see the Naruto caught in her illusion go up in a puff of smoke. Now, would you like to continue? Kurenai hung her head. She knew she couldn't do more. She had already used far too much chakra as it was, and she had no idea just what all he was capable of. Thinking back, she realized he had only really used one technique on her. The rest was nothing but speed and breaking out of her genjutsu. I yield. She felt like crawling into a ball right there. She was forced, in front of her team, to admit defeat to a genin. Do what you want to me. This not only surprised her team, but also Naruto. What are you talking about? He narrowed his eyes at the woman. You won the bet, so you get your way right. Quote. As appealing as your assets are, I am not the kind of male who would go after a woman just to have her. Not to mention I'm still rather young to even think about doing such things. Kurenai fixed him with a glare. And yet you collect them like trophies. I'm not blind, you know. I've seen you around with Hinata and that other girl, Haku. Parading them around like ribbons on display. How she hated men like him. That was her whole reason for becoming a genjutsu mistress. She wasn't physically strong, and she really didn't have much talent in anything but genjutsu, so she poured her all into it. She was even so confident in her skills that she made a bet with the other jonin that if they could beat her in a distance match, that she would be willing to let them have her. The only ones foolish enough to go after her soon fell unconscious at her feet after screaming all of the air out of their lungs. One reason why she was the genjutsu mistress was because her genjutsu were unusually strong. She could make even a basic D-rank genjutsu into a very strong attack that would fell most opponents. Naruto let go of her, causing her to stumble forward a bit. If that is what you think of me, then you know me even less than I thought you did. I do not choose who wants to be around me. They chose it themselves. If they wanted to leave, then they are free to do so. I would be sad, but I would let them go and hope they can find something or someone to make them happy. Kurenai looked to Hinata, who nodded in confirmation. You still allow it? What kind of man other than a pervert would want to have multiple women? Naruto smirked a bit. I'll be honest. What man wouldn't? I'll bet even Shino would want more than one woman if he could. To their surprise, Shino gained a bit of a blush at the comment. But that doesn't mean I want them for anything other than their company. I won't force them to do anything. I won't even ask them to do anything, nor do I want to do anything. As I said before, we are far too young for that, but when we get older, if they still feel the same way, then who am I to deny them? I just want to see my precious people happy no matter what. Fine. Then if it's not me you want, what do you want? Now it was Naruto's turn to give an evil smirk. One that sent shivers down even Shino's spine. Simple. You're going to join us in training. It was late afternoon before they had finished for the day, and everyone was practically dragging themselves through the yard. Well, everyone but Naruto. Even Kurenai was a heap as she felt her muscles protest with every movement. They all made a mental recollection of what had been the most hellish training day they'd ever had. First, Naruto had made them line up and reveal their ankles, wrists, stomachs and lower backs. This caused blushes on the female side as they exposed their skin, but it got a bit complicated when it came to Kurenai. She was wearing her normal dress, making it rather difficult to show some of the correct places, but Naruto was adamant about having those places exposed, so begrudgingly she did so, but not before making Shino give her his jacket to put over her now exposed panty-clad waist, which only got revealed after the boys had turned around. Then it was Harem's turn to blush as a portion of Shino's physique was displayed. While it was nowhere near Naruto's, at least he was wearing a shirt, even if it was mesh. After everyone was exposed, he quickly went from one to the next, drawing seals on their skin. Another thing that Kurenai was not too comfortable with. In fact, she was so uncomfortable with it that her opinions woke Haku, who groggily made her way over to the group and joined them. After a bit of arguing and Naruto showing off his own seals, Kurenai let him continue with promises of death if he did anything fishy. When all the seals were finished, he pushed a little chakra into each one, then told them to get up. That had been the most amusing part for him. All of them had tried to get up thinking it would be a normal task, but were soon sent back on their asses as they found out just what the seals did. It was another yelling match for Kurenai, but he calmly reminded her that this was his class now and they were to do as they were told. Which began with laps. He made them run until they dropped, then let them rest as they drank some water to replace their lost fluids. Once again Kurenai was embarrassed as her lack of physical strength was shown. Shino and Haku were able to keep up with her for the most part, but Naruto ran around lapping them all. At one point Harem yelled at him saying he was cheating and his weights were different, which was technically true. She was brought to reality though when he offered to make hers more like his. He explained as he added another line to hers that each line made the weights heavier. She found out just after he reactivated it exactly what he meant, as she could no longer move the leg that he had changed the seal on. He laughed at her for a while before removing the line and setting it back how it was. Only a few then re-inspected Naruto's visible seals and were astonished by the intricate patterns of lines they saw. They were almost like tattoos, and when asked, Naruto told them that the amount of weight each line added was proportionate to the length and width of the line. He just decided that rather than making a whole bunch of lines, or lengthening one in a spiral like many ninja do, that he would instead make designs as he increased his weights. After their rest they had some sparring to see where their taijutsu was at. Then some jutsu practice and questioning about their likes and dislikes as far as techniques go. Naruto already knew them, but he felt it would be beneficial if they all knew each other's. Once they all knew what the others were interested in, Naruto brought out his surprises, in other words what he was really going to train them in. Haku-chan is learning her family's ninjutsu, and she already knows how to use throwing weapons, so I'll be helping her with the ninjutsu as much as I can as well as a little taijutsu. Hinata, we're going to look at your taijutsu and see what's wrong with it. Anyo, what do you mean? I use the correct forms of Juken. Father just said I needed to practice more, a lot more. She lowered her head in shame. The council believed me a lost cause. No, it just doesn't suit you. Kurenai was shocked. Juken not suiting a Hyuga. She almost wanted to laugh at the boy. You are far more agile than any other Hyuga I've seen, so we'll be modifying your style to fit your body. I would also like Hinata and Haku to work on medical jutsu as well, since both of you have interests there. I'm not very good in that field, but I'll help where I can. Shino, you rely too much on your bugs, but I have a fix for that. Your dad seems to be interested in what I'm going to teach you as well, so don't worry about too much conflict there. You will all be learning traps, namely seal traps, but Shino will be learning them the most. He took out a scroll and unsealed something. When the smoke cleared, he was holding a short rod with a small prong on one side and a rope attached to that same end. Harem, this is a jute. It will be your first step in kenjutsu training. Depending how you do with this, we can move to another weapon more suiting your natural style. They all were about to get up to start, but stopped when they saw Naruto go back to his scroll. Another puff of smoke and there was another object sitting in his lap. Kurenai-san. This is your new best friend. He walked over to her and had her hold out her arm. A few lashings later and there was a Senbon launcher strapped to her forearm and a quiver of spare bolts at her waist. Your genjutsu is great, but as I showed you, you will need something against someone who can break it. This will keep them away to give backup time to arrive, or until you can cast a strong enough jutsu. Also this. Another puff of smoke and a kodachi was in his hand. It wasn't a masterpiece by any means, but good enough for their purpose. This you will use if they get too close. It's small enough to maneuver if you're caught in a tight spot, but long enough to keep people away. Now he stood and they followed. Naruto-san, these weapons are a bit too expensive, don't you think? I mean, we appreciate it, but I know weapons aren't the cheapest of things to acquire. Harem was obviously torn between admitting this and just keeping the gift. Harem-chan. Your jute came from a crooked police officer from Wave Country. He joined Gato's men to attack Wave and he lost this along with his life, so believe me, it won't be missed. Kurenai-san, your Senbon launcher is also from Wave, from a random mercenary under the same circumstances. Your kodachi, on the other hand, I can't tell you where it is from. Yet, but I can say that its previous owner won't miss it either. This was one of the weapons he'd gotten from a Chunin hopeful out of the Forest of Death, but they didn't need to know that right now. He would let them know later though. They would have to realize that it wouldn't be a picnic. See. Harem muttered, realizing now why the rope on her jute looked reddish in places. After all, blood doesn't wash out easily. Now I won't train you anymore today. I want you to familiarize yourselves with what you already know and get used to doing those actions with the weights on. Tomorrow we'll begin the true hell, and I promise you that, by the time the Chunin exams start, you will hate me. You are welcome to use this area so you don't have to worry about people watching us train, and anything you do learn from me will only be practiced here. That way other teams won't know what to expect, as I'm sure there are already some that are trying to gather information on who they can. No contact though. Kurenai-san, I would like to speak to you before you go. Getting a nod from all of them, he walked towards the house along with Kurenai and into his office. Kurenai spoke up as Naruto took a seat behind his desk. So you found something important, I assume. You were followed on your way here. I didn't see who, but you should keep an eye out when you're training from now on. If you want, you can do your training here, so you won't need to worry about spies. This of course will only be allowed when I am present here as well, due to there being secrets here I do not wish to reveal. If I were to guess, I would say that I'm being watched as well by the council, but they probably already know that you're here, so it's too late to worry about that. A bit of advice though, the civilian council has no real hold on what we ninja do, so if they start asking questions, you don't have to answer. Also, they may have some unsanctioned ninja confront you as well. If one comes to you asking questions and claiming to be from the ninja council, you have the right to question it in front of the Hokage himself. I ask that you take such actions because while you may not worry about them finding out about the things your team is learning, I cannot afford to let anyone know about my abilities or training methods outside of those I trust. I plan on making us some of the best before this exam, and I don't want to let what we're doing here get out to other teams. Especially Team 7. The entire time he spoke, he had her fixed with a stare that made her flinch whenever he emphasized a point. When he had finished, she nodded, uncertain of why exactly he was so concerned, but trusting his instincts a bit more after how he showed his ability to train, or at least work people into the ground. He had given them weapons too. No matter how he acquired them, they were still worth something, and that something was a lot more than what she had expected coming from what she thought a genin sensei could or would do. Why are you going so far to help my team? Won't we just end up learning each other's strengths and weaknesses? Or are you using this for your own intelligence gathering? You think I'm trying to get the upper hand on your team? Naruto deadpanned. Then to Kurenai's complete amazement he broke out laughing. You do remember that my girlfriend is on your team, right? The one that I asked out after graduation. If anything, when we meet each other in the exam we'll be helping each other as much as we can. You're still welcome to do your own training with them in the mornings though. Quote. If you don't trust me you are free to have your team do as you see fit. Know though that they will be training in the open where those shadows of yours can see. Plus you, or they, would have to take the time to find people who can actually train them in what they need to know to survive. Are you able to take that risk? Quote. I'll see you tomorrow, Kurenai-san. Chapter 12. Exam start. A few days before the start of the exam found Team 8 and Team 11 walking through the streets of Konoha. Based on outward appearances, none of them had changed at all save for a few additions to their wardrobe. A weapon here and an extra pouch there was all that showed they had done anything new at all for the past near month of training. The only really noticeable difference was that they all seemed to be regarding Naruto with a bit of disdain, but at the same time if one looked closely they could see that they had a certain level of respect for the blonde. Even Kurenai, who was not with them at the time, had changed her point of view towards the boy. When her peers asked her about her new accessories she simply said that they were safety precautions and would leave it at that. Those who were still actively pursuing her though found that she hadn't just picked them up for show and was actually able to utilize them somewhat, much to their dismay. True to Naruto's words, Team 8 had been approached by some rather undesirable people. Anyone from Team 7's genin to the civilian council. Even Sakura's mother approached them claiming to want what was best for her daughter. Every time they were approached it was the same thing though. What business do you have in the Yondaime's estate? Why are you playing with that dobi so much? Tell us what that baka is doing in there. We demand you tell us what you are learning as it may help the Uchiha succeed. And just like Naruto said they didn't have to say a word. Sure they were threatened with everything from being forced off active duty to torture from Ibiki, but after constant refusal to give away their secrets each person had to back down. Especially after they were threatened, after one too many trips to the Hokage, that those punishments would be wrought on them if they didn't stop interrupting his work. After about a week and a half of trying to bully out what they wanted, they had actually tried gaining entrance to the property. They tried scaling the walls which ended up in a few knocked out members of Team 7, forcing their way in as the gate closed which was met with a greater force back considering Team 11 plus Team 8 were ready for them knowing they would try such a thing and the two elders even tried forging papers from the Hokage saying that they were to be granted immediate entrance to secure anything that may be of use to the last Uchiha. That last one got Naruto rather pissed and ended up with him literally dragging the advisors and their precious, though thankfully once more unconscious, Uchiha to the Hokage tower as everyone in the way shrunk back from the killing intent he radiated. The whole trip a pink-haired tramp was screaming after them giving Sarutobi ample time to prepare for the imminent storm. After that incident the events died down a little. Sasuke still attempted to gain entrance every now and then, but the advisors were more or less curbed. So why are we taking a walk now, Naruto-san? Harem now had a wakizashi strapped to her back and her jute at her side. She was now proficient with both weapons, not a master by any means, but good enough that she wouldn't stab herself and could actually pose a threat. The exams start soon, so that means our competition will be starting to drift in. We're looking for them to see what we might be up against, so hide what you can of your abilities. Once said Harem moved her jute a bit so it was hidden by her clothing, but there was little she could do about her sword. Good, now be on the lookout for anyone that doesn't belong. They spent the next 2 hours just walking around chatting as though they were just a bunch of friends hanging out. Initially they didn't see anyone that didn't belong, but as time went by they started seeing more and more ninja from other villages. There wasn't much to go by, but they could at least see some of the weapons they would be up against. They could easily tell who were new to the exams though. The ones that were looking around in every direction at once trying to decide what to do in a foreign village. Then there were the veterans. Ninja that had taken this test before and for one reason or another had to take it again. Those ninja just sat around in restaurants or walked casually through the streets not even bothering to look at their surroundings except when a hot girl or guy would walk by. The group already had to give out several warnings on conduct in a foreign village to numerous people, most of which just snuffed at them before walking off to find new prey. It was about noon when they heard a ruckus around one corner and decided to investigate. What they found was a black-suited ninja from Suna holding up a scared little kid, while a disheveled Sakura and Kiba threw insults at them. His teammates seemed to want him to just put the kid down before their other teammates showed up. They seemed to be afraid of whoever the person was, but despite that the guy didn't listen and drew back to hit the kid. A rock impacted his hand right when teams 8 and 11 made their presence known. You may want to put the kid down before you give me an excuse to kick your asses down the street, pajama boy. Sasuke was standing in a nearby tree with a smirk on his face, though looking a bit ragged like his teammates, while Sakura praised his ability to hit a hand from 15 feet away. He's kind of cute for a konoha nin, but why do they look like they've just been through a fight? The blonde Suna Kunoichi seemed to be checking out the raven-haired boy, which he apparently noticed as his smirk deepened and he jumped down. You seem like a strong Kunoichi unlike the females here. Maybe you'd like to go back to my place and get to know one another. He stalked a bit closer but was blocked by the black-suited shinobi who threw the kid he was holding to the side. That's my sister you're talking about, pal, so unless you want to be a few limbs shorter I suggest you back. Off. The boy hoisted the package that was strapped to his back. Konkuro. You can't use that here, we'll get thrown out. The girl narrowed her eyes at the boy as she scolded him. Shut up, Tamari. I'm not letting this punk anywhere near you. But you're right, I shouldn't need Karasu for this weakling. He smirked but all motion stopped as killing intent flooded the alley. Konkuro. Stop before you embarrass us. A red-haired boy appeared on a branch of the same tree Sasuke had just left. But Gaara. They started it. Konkuro tried to reason with the new arrival. Shut up, or I'll kill you. Tamari and Konkuro began to sweat now. Gaara. Please let's just go. Come on. Listen to your Oni-san. Please. Said boy vanished in a whirl of sand and appeared in front of the other two. Never have I thought of you as my siblings. If you get in my way, I will kill you. He walked past them as they all stood there frozen. Though one of them managed to talk. Hold it there. You're from Suna. What business do you have walking around these streets? Kiba managed to quell the invisible force a little, but most of those present wanted to smack him across the head for asking such a stupid question. Yeah, what business does Suna have in Konoha? Yeah, most didn't include the bubblegum princess. It was Hinata who answered for them though. They are most likely here for the Chunin exams, as are most of the foreign ninja that are currently in the village. Oh Hinata, I heard about what your dad did to you. That's too bad. Hey, now that you're not a clan heir anymore, how about we continue our date? Ditch the dobi and I'll show you what a real date is. Kiba began walking over to her but was stopped by a sword, heavy ice boots and a kunai backed by the sound of buzzing insects. You may want to back off, Kiba-san. Naruto-kun wouldn't like your advances on his girlfriend. Haku spat at him. To which he just growled. The exchange seemed to intrigue the Suna nin as they couldn't figure out who this Naruto was, or why he had such loyalty from obviously more than just his team, while other ninja from the same village seemed to detest him if the looks on the other three faces meant anything. And where is this Naruto you speak of? The coward seems to have hidden before he was in danger. Kiba growled out. Just enjoying the view. Everyone jumped in surprise. Even Gaara raised his head a bit and widened his eyes a fraction. As the three Suna nin turned, they revealed a blonde teen standing only a couple feet behind them. Arms crossed and leaning against the nearby fence as he cleaned his fingernails with a kunai. These types of exchanges amuse me. They amuse you too, don't they, Gaara-san? Naruto evened his eyes with the redhead and held his ground. Tamari couldn't believe it. Here was a boy, about the age of her youngest brother, who had snuck around them and gotten this close without any of them noticing. Quite the feat considering Gaara was always on guard due to his life. Forget the Raven guy though. Wow. What a piece this guy is. He's not a pretty boy, like the other one, but I can practically feel the power rolling off him. Maybe if I'm lucky Gaara won't kill him. Then all I have to do is get him to see I'm twice the woman his little girlfriend is. She was brought out of her daze as Gaara began walking once again, followed by Konkuro. Gaara stopped only once more to turn and look at Naruto again. Naruto-san. You are like me. I look forward to when we prove our existence. A simple comment, but one that sent shivers down the Sunanin's spines, and dashed Temari's hopes. Once the three left, Naruto turned back towards his companions. Okay, let him go. Haku, Harem and Shino released Kiba and backed up, though staying between the boy and Hinata, weapons still at hand just in case. Team 7, I suggest you move along and we will do the same. We all have stuff to do, I'm sure. Taking the coward's way out then, Hadobi. Naruto took a moment to think, then turned to the last Uchiha. Sasuke-chan, if you are that desperate to beat me, then I suggest you wait until the exam. That way you can show us all just how superior you are. Besides, you don't look like you just got out of a fight, and I wouldn't want to give you any excuses as to why you might lose. His friends didn't know whether to laugh at the obvious jabs or to roll their eyes at the Tem for actually believing such a thing. You're right, Dobi, for once. It'll be so much better to humiliate you in front of everyone than to take you out in some back alley. And just because Kakashi is trying to, as he puts it, beat some sense into you, that doesn't mean I won't wipe the floor with you. He shoved his hands in his pockets and turned to leave, signaling to his teammates that it was time to go. Well, as amusing as that was to watch, try not to kill him before the exams. I think it's about time that he gets to show off just how badly he can beat me in front of the whole village. I'm sure by the end they'll be screaming his name, followed by a call for a medic. Naruto turned and did his best impression of an emo with a stick up his ass, much to his friends' amusement as they walked off to scout some more. The next day everyone was ordered by Naruto to take the remaining time off from training and relax. He didn't want them risking any last-minute injuries, but they were told to keep their weights on. Everyone was a bit happy at this, as yesterday was the only relaxation day they thought they would get, even though it ended up being a bit of a death march considering how heavy they were now. Walking around for hours left them a bit sore and they could use the time to recuperate. Back at Naruto's estate, the three were simply relaxing as they read, did some house upkeep, or gathered their supplies for the exam. Since Naruto knew that at least one part would be in the forest, he told them to be prepared for a full mission outside of Konoha with the chance of fighting extremely high. They were shocked when he told them what he knew, and Kurenai could do little but confirm it, since he told her that the kodachi she was carrying came from the body of one Chunin hopeful. That put her off a bit, but Naruto reasoned with her that it was better that it got put to use rather than rusting on the forest floor. It was slightly before lunch when there was noise at the gate. Naruto got up from polishing his katana and ninjutsu and went outside, leaving the two ladies in the living room to read their scrolls. He was met at the gate by the blonde-haired Sunanin from the day before. Temari-san, what can I do for you? And how did you find this place? Temari blushed a bit. She didn't want to admit she'd followed him the night before once she was free of her two brothers to roam the village alone. Sure, she had to fight off a few pests, but when she saw his house she knew he had to be something special. Her team was forced to study maps of the village to familiarize themselves with it as much as possible, and this house was one of the buildings marked with warnings all over it. The Yondaime's estate that supposedly no one could enter on account of the Sandame's order and ownership of the property, along with the high probability of traps contained within. Anyone who could get a cage to give up their personal land had to be someone important. You're Naruto-san, right? She got a nod and she shifted her feet. She wasn't used to this, but when her Jonin-sensei pushed her to do it so they could find out more about him and his team, she reluctantly agreed. Baki had originally wanted her to go after the Uchiha, but after hearing about their encounter, and how even Gaara was a bit surprised at the unknown boy, he decided to switch targets. I was wondering if you could show me a little more around this place. Since my team is from the desert, it's not very often we get to see a whole lot of green. Now it was Naruto's turn to get a little embarrassed. Well, as much as I would like to, Temari-san, I don't know that my girlfriends would appreciate me going out with someone I just met. Oh, I'm sure you're. Wait, did you say girlfriends? She stared at him wide-eyed, trying to process the information. Oh great, so he's a womanizer. But, no, he seems more worried about them rather than himself, or is it that he doesn't see me as attractive enough? She didn't know whether to be angry or feel dejected. Yeah, it's a long story, but if you want you can come in and I'll see if they want to come along. I'm sure if they can come too it won't be a big deal. He could see the despair on her face, but he wasn't about to cheat any more than he felt he was doing already, no matter how pretty she was. Tamari reluctantly nodded and was led into the house. Haku-chan, Hinata-chan, you remember Tamari-san from yesterday? Both girls looked up, made a bit of a sour face and went back to reading. Well, that could have gone better. Anyhow, Tamari-san wanted to know if we would escort her around the village. To get a residence view, I guess, so how about it? Do you two want to help me give her a tour? Once again they looked up, then looked at each other, then back up to the two addressing them. A curt nod was their only reply as they got up and the small group left the house. Hinata was the first to start up conversation. Naruto-kun, tomorrow is a light maneuver day, right? Naruto took up a bit of a thinking pose. Hi, you may want to let your team know later. Light maneuver day. Ah, sorry Tamari-san. Training secrets and all. Can't tell you. Sorry. Haku and Hinata did a little victory dance in their heads. Oh, how they were going to enjoy this. It was a long day and they definitely made the most of it. Naruto and his girls made sure to show Tamari everything that would be considered an attraction. Soon it was no longer just Naruto who was showing Tamari around, but Haku and Hinata gave their input as well. After they had explained their rather unique situation to her, they began to get along extremely well, often going off to whisper secrets where Naruto couldn't hear and coming back giggling and or blushing. Practically the only thing they didn't talk about when Naruto was around was Naruto. Tamari did try to pry into their training and strengths a bit, but, at Naruto's warning that she was getting into dangerous waters, she stopped. After a brief dinner at Ichiraku's where Naruto was once again tormented by the owner and his daughter, they walked Tamari to her apartment and said their farewells. Tamari even gave them all a kiss on the cheek as thanks, causing all three to blush and Tamari to walk up the stairs to her team's hotel room laughing. Her demeanor only changed once she was safely inside the room. What did you find out, Tamari? Baki startled her from the shadows on the other side of the room. She hated when he did that. It was like he was trying to show off to her. Did he expect her to jump into his arms like a scared little schoolgirl? Other than that, the guy has his own house, has no parents and 2 girlfriends that live with him. Not much. Every time I tried to ask about their training or what jutsu they like the most, their mouths shut quickly. He may be friendly, but he's careful. So it was a waste of time then. Shit. I should have sent you with that arrogant Uchiha. He probably would have spilled it all with a kiss. Hell, we probably could have turned him to our side if you went a little further. Bastard. I'm not just some object here. I'm not going to give anything to that weak little prick. If you think I'm just going to whore myself out for information, you've got another thing coming. Baki was going to retort back, but Gaara decided to make his presence known. You are both too loud. He was standing in the doorway to the bedroom glaring at them both. Sorry Gaara. We'll keep it down. I'm going to get some rest. She sent another scowl at Baki before heading into the bedroom where Konkuro was busy working on his puppet. Konkuro, don't leave this room until I wake up. Baki-sensei has me on edge and I don't need him trying anything, and try to keep it to a dull roar please while I get some sleep. Hi. Konkuro just waved her on. This wasn't the first time she'd done this to him and he really couldn't blame her. Their sensei was chosen because he was the least afraid of them. A man who sought power over his own safety. When they graduated he had jumped at the opportunity to get close to the Kage's children, and for some reason they couldn't shake the feeling that he wanted more. That was proven on one mission where Baki attempted to crawl into Temari's tent at night only to be caught during the struggle by Gaara's sand before he was whipped out of the tent and into a tree. The only reason Gaara had acted though was because Baki was making too much noise. Konkuro was up by then however and he and Tamari told Gaara that if Baki tried anything again that they would make more noise than ever. The boy had fixed all of them with an icy glare and told them that if they disturbed him again he would kill them all. After that, it had settled down as Tamari forced Konkuro to sleep in her tent. Gender be damned, she wasn't going to have her sensei knock her up for power. Though Baki looked in every now and then to check on them, he never was able to try anything. He knew that if he tried anything, that if Gaara didn't kill him, Temari and Kankura would put up enough of a fuss to have Konoha's Anbu there in no time. Thus he was stuck putting his personal plans on hold a while longer in favor of babysitting the three genin on this little excursion. Not only that, but he couldn't risk them getting injured or caught while there was still a job to do, so he would have to wait. After a brief, uncomfortable dinner, they all turned in for the night, which Baki spent on the couch. There was no point in keeping a guard since Gaara didn't sleep anyway. The next morning, teams 8 and 11 were in higher spirits than normal. It was a light maneuver day, and that meant Naruto would be deactivating their weights so they could get used to their new speed and strength. They were thoroughly warned yet again not to overdo it since the exams were tomorrow, so they all went for a bit of a nature hike outside of the village. Even Kurenai was able to join them after clearing her duties for the day with the Hokage. The day was largely uneventful though, since Naruto and Kurenai insisted they rest since a few of them had been walking around the day before with weights on the whole time. It wouldn't have been so bad had Naruto not been increasing their weights after every light maneuver day. By now they had the beginnings of little pictures where their seals were, though only one person knew what they would turn out to be, and that was the one who applied the seals. They had a nice picnic at a nearby lake and just walked around in the woods a bit, enjoying each other's company and going over strategies based on what they had discovered as they were scouting. They were able to put together a pretty comprehensive list of who all would be in the exam, and that list was by no means small. There were teams from almost every country, or in some cases, multiple teams. They saw ninja that looked like they had been through the exam a couple of times, but all they could learn from those ninja was that the exams were never the same in any two villages. Not the biggest of help, and Kurenai was sworn not to tell anything. The only part they really knew about was the Forest of Death was involved in the main tournament in the stadium that everyone was invited to attend. All in all, they only had a marginally better idea of what they were getting into, but every little bit would help, so they drank all the information up and sorted out each tiny detail. The teams that made them the most nervous though were those from Suna, Odo, Kumo and Kusa. Even though Odo was rather new, they held themselves with an almost Uchiha level of arrogance. Kumo made the list strictly because of Hinata's past with them. Kusa, they all agreed, was just creepy. Lastly, Suna had Gaara, someone that Naruto warned them was not one to be taken lightly, and anyone Naruto seemed nervous about was definitely someone they would try to stay away from. After their information exchange, they returned to their houses for personal training time until they would turn in for the night. All of them left feeling a bit anxious, yet excited at the prospect of passing the exam the next day. None of them had been to the academy since graduating, and a couple of them felt a little bad about not visiting their old instructors, for now though they needed to keep their minds on other things. Namely the first exam. Teams 8 and 11 met outside the academy and entered together, passing the crowd of Chunin hopefuls on the second floor as they followed Naruto to the third. They could hear the Uchiha pushing his weight around behind them, and groaned a bit since he had single-handedly given them more competition. Oh well, at least there will be some easy pickings if we have to fight early on, was the general thought amongst them. They soon found themselves in a large classroom along with other people who had already arrived and just took a spot against a wall and kept to themselves. At least that was the plan. A few minutes later, Team 7 burst through the door with Sasuke looking a bit dirtier than before, though that didn't seem to deter Sakura or Ino from glomping him. Kiba once again tried to make a beeline for Hinata, but was smart enough to think twice when he saw who was around her. Namely the same three who had stopped him previously. He started to growl a bit, but another leaf genin walked up to them. One with silver hair and glasses. You fresh genin need to learn to keep it down. Can't you sense the atmosphere? Everyone is already tense from their nervousness. The unrecognized Konoha nin looked around at the fresh arrivals, weighing them individually and making a few of them rather uncomfortable. Who are you? My name is Yakushi Kabuto and I'm somewhat of a veteran of this exam. Oh really? How many times have you taken it, Kabuto-san? Sakura tried to be polite in front of fellow ninja of the village. Kabuto scratched his nose in embarrassment. Hey, this will be my 7th time trying. The Konoha genin were shocked. Wow, 7 times. You must really suck. Kiba couldn't help but laugh, earning a smack on the back of his head from Sakura. Hey, that may be, But thanks to doing this so many times I've been able to gather a lot of good information. Kabuto whipped out a deck of cards and shuffled them. These are my nin info cards. I have information on everyone attending this year. Since you're new, I'll be nice and help you out a bit. Is there anyone here you want information on? Sasuke stepped forward. I want information on Sabaku no Gaara of Suna, Rock Lee of Konoha, and Uzumaki Naruto of Konoha. He glared over at the last boy named, whom narrowed his eyes in return. Finally, I'll get some dirt on you, Dobi. Oh, you know their names already. That's no fun. Shuffling his deck again, Kabuto pulled out 3 cards. Let's see Rock Lee's first. He's done about 20 D rank and 11 C rank missions. Not bad considering he's a year older than you. He excels at taijutsu, but ninjutsu and genjutsu are nearly non-existent. This will be his first time entering with his team of Harusada Tenten and Hyuga Neji. Naruto hugged Hinata a little closer when he saw her tense at her cousin's name. Next up is Sabaku no Gaara. His team has completed 8 C rank and, wow, 1 B rank mission. It says he's come back from every one of them unharmed. A genin doing a B rank is highly unusual, but to be unharmed afterward is unheard of. Skills are unknown, but this is also his first year along with his teammates and siblings, his older brother Kankuro and their older sister Tamari. Well, last one has to be Uzumaki Naruto. Kabuto channeled a little chakra into the last card to get the information to display, but as soon as the statistics began to show, the card disappeared. No one missed the event as the card was being held right in front of them. They all looked around to see Naruto casually walking back to his friends, twirling the card in his fingers. Give that back, Dobi. Sasuke made a lunge for the card as it was his last chance to get any decent information on the blonde. He was easily dodged though before he found an all too familiar blade at his throat. Naruto stood with his ninja-bearing arm outstretched with the tip gently resting right on Sasuke's collarbone, easily within reach of numerous fatal points. Sasuke could only grit his teeth as Naruto turned to address Kabuto. Kabuto-san. You are playing a dangerous game. I would advise you not give out any further information about my friends or myself, otherwise you will end up just like this card. With that, he flipped the card into the air before taking his sword from Sasuke's throat and slashing the unique piece of information into little slivers, ruining whatever seals made it function. Do I make myself clear? His gaze was even and fixed on his fellow Konoha shinobi, who was now backing up a bit and waving his hands defensively. No harm meant, Naruto-san. I just like to gather information. It's a bit of a hobby of mine. Perhaps a little general information would be okay. Just something about the exam as a whole. Naruto wasn't convinced about his sincerity, but nodded his consent. Before that, may I ask one question? I noticed that all of your mission ranks had a positive number listed. Is that accurate? He cocked an eyebrow at the blonde. His interest was obviously piqued. The Dobi showed up on our C rank turned A rank mission that we did about a month ago. He was just lucky to be sent as the backup that we never needed. Naruto and Haku just rolled their eyes at the Avenger. No, my cards list D rank, to S rank. There were no zeros. The heads of everyone close enough to hear the statement shot over to Naruto, who in turn was now glaring at Kabuto. The listings of S rank missions is privileged information, Kabuto-san. I don't know how you got it, but I will find out. Naruto narrowed his eyes in obvious suspicion, while others were staring at him in either awe or hatred. Noticing the looks around him, he knew he was in for questions. Before anyone asks, I don't know anything about any S-rank missions, so Kabuto-san's card must be inaccurate. That or he was mistaken in what he saw. Despite Naruto's denial, Sasuke was fuming at the possibility of the Dobi already having an S-rank mission under his belt. How dare they give him such glory? I will go to that old bastard myself and demand a mission of the same rank. I will not let you hold anything over my head, Dobi. Sakura and Ino were trying to convince themselves that their Sasuke-kun could have done an S-rank mission easily if the Baka was able to. Only one was actually able to stay strong in her reasoning though, while Ino found herself wondering if Naruto had really done such a high mission. She decided to find out what she could later. Being the gossip queen, she hoped to find someone willing to spill at least a little bit of dirt on him. Hinata and Haku couldn't have been more proud of their boyfriend, and stood there all smiles even though they knew that divulging such information was extremely dangerous in this environment. Still, they couldn't help but wonder what kind of S-rank mission he could have performed. The rumors of such missions were not for the faint of heart or weak of stomach normally. They shuddered to think of him assassinating some important political figure, or worse, their family. Kiba was suddenly finding himself wanting to dig a hole to hide in. If what Kabuto said was true, then there was almost no hope of him measuring up to Naruto. That didn't mean he wouldn't try though. There are more ways to a woman's heart than strength after all. Most of those ninja nod of Konoha that had overheard the announcement, edged away a bit and promised themselves that, regardless of whether the information was accurate, they would give Naruto's team a wide berth if they had to do any fighting. Others were giving him measuring glances, as if sizing up for themselves just how much a threat he could pose to them. Well, maybe. Anyway, here is one showing the makeup of this year's exam. It shows the number of ninja that are taking it from each country. The biggest turnout is from Konoha, of course, but there are some decent numbers from Kumo and a couple of the smaller countries. Oto is a newly founded hidden village, but since they are so new they probably won't pose much a threat. His talk was stopped short as a shape made its way through the crowd and swung at Kabuto, barely missing. Foolish, was all Naruto said before turning back and joining his friends. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? He just gave away his main attack. The others looked past him to see Kabuto now kneeling on the floor showing everyone what his last meal was. Questions were waylaid though when a large puff of smoke exploded at the front of the classroom revealing a tall man in a black trench coat. All right, you ungrateful insects, knock it off before I throw you out of the exam. Now everyone get to your assigned seats, it's time to start the first part of the exam. As the ninja scrambled to their seats they found papers there waiting for them. Do not look at the paper in front of you until I say. Now for the rules. Ibiki explained all about how the test would proceed with points being taken off for cheating, and if your team's points reached 0 you would fail. The 10th question will be given at the end of the test. Until then, good luck. You may begin. Heads bowed and papers flipped as the genin took their first looks at the paper. It was obvious to anyone that wasn't a complete moron that the whole test was a sham, and soon enough people were getting disqualified for cheating. Naruto-kun. You can copy my answers if you need to. Hinata told her neighbor since he hadn't seemed to move in a while. He only seemed to scribble on the paper a little bit before turning it over and setting his head on the desk. No thanks, Hinata-chan. I'm already finished. He leaned forward again and was about to close his eyes when a shadow formed up in front of him. Giving up already, boy? Ibiki loved this exam. It was his own little taste of mental torture. The temperature of the room was a little higher to cause irritability, the pressure of being watched and the far too difficult questions. People would usually give up or get caught. Yet here was someone who decided to sleep amongst the stress. The boy looked up then and Ibiki instantly knew why. Ah. Hello, Ibiki-san. I hadn't paid much attention to who the proctor was. I hope our little excursion didn't deter you from doing your job. Just like that, Ibiki was on the defensive. Ah. No. We managed, and thanks to your help it was a lot easier than it could have been. That was all he was willing to give as he turned away to yell at a random genin for cheating, receiving a little laugh from Naruto, who in turn was getting mixed looks from many in the classroom. After almost an hour a good number of genin had already been disqualified and Naruto still had his head down. Alright, it's time for the last question, but first there are some more rules. Once again the man spouted out his rules for the 10th question. There were cries of how unfair it was, but he gave them the choice of leaving and failing, or staying and answering the question. Getting it wrong would result in a lifetime of being a genin. Getting it right allowed you to the next part of the exam. Naruto waited until there were just a few weak teams left, then gave a short speech on how he would never back down no matter what. That it was his nindo. This caused a boost of courage to everyone left, much to Ibiki's ire. This is your last chance. Leave or face the possibility of being genin forever. No one. Then you all pass. It was quiet for a minute before the classroom erupted with noise. Ibiki explained how it was a simulated life or death choice that they could encounter on any mission as a chunin. There is no bed and drinks for anyone who gets captured. He took off his bandana, revealing his scarred head. The price of information is far too great for anyone to be spared an ounce of pain. If you are unwilling to face such a consequence, then you are unfit to be a chunin. The rest of the test was simply information gathering and spy skills. If you get caught out in the field trying to gain secrets, then this is the outcome. He wanted to give them a few minutes to let it sink in, but it was not to be, as a black ball shot through the window and a banner shot out introducing the next proctor. My name is Mitarashi Anko and I am the proctor for the second part of the exam. She grinned and gave them all a thumbs up. Anko, can't you read the mood? Ibiki peeked from around the banner. Anko looked around the room and sweat dropped. Ibiki, you left so many teams. You're slipping in your old age. No, we just have some unusually talented genin this time. Especially that one in the third row on the right. He whispered back to her. She looked to where he indicated and gasped. There he was, sitting and staring through her with those deathly cold blue orbs. The same ones that had haunted her since she first saw them. She was reminded of the last thing he told them when they met in Orochimaru's lair and shivered. I see what you mean. Well, anyhow, your next exam will be held in Training Ground 44. Follow me and don't be late. With that, she was gone with all the genin hopefuls hot on her heels. Ibiki began to gather the test sheets from around the room, but stopped when he got to a certain sheet. Two things caught his eye about the completed paper. One was a seal that he'd never seen before. The other was a note at the bottom. Ibiki-san. The genin Yakushi Kabuto seems to know a bit more information than he should about everyone here. I would advise you keep an eye on him. Give this paper to Hokage-sama. He turned to one of his assistants. Finish up here. I need to go talk to Hokage-sama. Receiving nods of understanding, he walked out, quietly wondering what the blonde boy was up to. The tall gate surrounded the clump of forest that was separated from the rest of the land around it. Warning signs were posted at every gate and all over the areas between, stating a horrible demise to anyone that passed them. It was a rather intriguing thing to Naruto every time he saw it, but to those new to the place he could see the worry and fear written all over them. His rather tight-knit group of friends stuck together though. They already had a plan for this part of the exam, and thanks to Naruto's knowledge of the forest, they had a decent map. The only part they really paid attention to when Anko was talking, was when she described the process with the scrolls. This of course didn't go over too well with Anko since she was used to having all eyes on her if her dress was any sign. Swish. The sharp edge of a kunai flew by Naruto's cheek, cutting into it slightly as a figure appeared behind him. You know, you really should be more aware, Naruto-kun. This place is dangerous and you might get hurt. Try not to cry too much in there. Everyone that didn't know Naruto's true abilities was snickering to all out laughing, causing a smile to grace Anko's lips. To add effect, she licked the spot where the blade had cut. I like the taste of your blood. If you die in there, I may just have to take another sample. Unless you're willing to back up that promise, Anko-san, I suggest you let go of my boyfriend. Unknown to Anko, Haku had appeared behind her much like she had done to Naruto, and now held a senbon at the proctor's neck. Unless of course you want me to let him have a taste of your blood in return. Anko smirked on the outside, but on the inside felt the chill of the threat pass through her. Out of the corner of her eye she also caught one of the Kusa genin licking his lips with an abnormally long tongue, sending another chill down her spine. Letting Naruto go, she smiled at Haku before continuing her speech, noting that throughout the whole ordeal Naruto had never once moved, but was instead smirking at her. Unlike Haku's chill in that form, the Kusa genin, Naruto's was much different to her. More like a thrill that she had rarely felt, and as such didn't know how exactly to categorize it. She felt like she was actually experiencing his determination. It was like she wanted to follow him just to see where he was going, something that she hadn't felt since the early days that she was with her former sensei. Shaking the thought aside, she continued with her speech about the forest and its rules before having them all sign waivers to relieve Konoha of any trouble should one of them die inside. With that done, each team got a scroll and made their way to their assigned gate. Teams 8 and 11 were close to each other with only 2 teams separating them, so it wouldn't be too much trouble finding each other inside. The biggest issue would be the Kumo teams closest to Team 8, who had been stealing glances at Hinata the whole morning. Before splitting up, the two teams made arrangements on where to meet up in the forest. They picked a spot a few hundred meters in the wood, provide ample cover should they need to ambush someone. The plan was to meet up, then start systematically taking out teams together until both teams had the scrolls they needed. They would now be 5-on-3 for most teams they encountered, but they weren't naive enough to think that they would be the only ones using this strategy. Once the sign was given, they, along with every other team, shot into the forest. It was just their luck. Team 8 just had to have the two Kumo teams on either side of them. Now they were pincered between them in a small clearing about halfway to their meeting point, and it was all too clear that they weren't after a scroll. "Hello, pretty little Hyuga. Would you like to be my girlfriend? I'm sure our cage would love to have a few Byakugan babies running around." The man was well over twice her age, yet here he was trying to make a pass at her. "Come on, what do ya say? We could even start working on that right now." He wiggled his eyebrows at her, making her want to retch. Shino and Harem did their best to stay between the two teams, and Hinata, it wasn't looking good though, as 6-on-3 odds never did. "We would advise you to not take such actions with our teammate. She is already with another, and I do not think he would be pleased to know you are thinking such things." "Ha. Like I would be afraid of some weak, little konoha brat. If he were half the man I am, he would have knocked this little whore up ages ago, and she wouldn't even be here now. I see though that words are futile with you, so I suppose we should start this little dance." As one, all of the Kumo ninja took up fighting stances. They were stuck with single target tactics, as they were under orders to not harm the Hyuga more than was necessary to capture her. At the fall of a random leaf, the action began and the first major fight of the second exam commenced. Naruto and Haku made it to the meeting point with little trouble. They had met one team on the way, but easily overcame them, as it was one of the teams Naruto had purposely instilled courage into during the first part of the exam. They were easily subdued as they were not ready for a life or death fight, so when faced off against someone who was so obviously confident of his abilities, they cowered and gave up. Now the two were waiting and Naruto was getting anxious. "They should have been here by now, Haku. I know. Something doesn't feel right. Should we go look for them? Those Kumo teams ended up pretty close when we were assigned gates. It's possible that they teamed up on them." Haku was watching him pace back and forth. She knew in her gut that something wasn't right. They had trained together with Team 8 all this time, and she knew they were faster than this, even if they weren't as fast as Naruto and herself, but then they had both been through hell training all their life, whether self-inflicted or forced. "That's what worries me. Quick, let's go. I don't want to be waiting here only to find out later that they got ambushed." The two darted off along the most likely path Team 8 would have taken from their gate as fast as they could. Shino was panting as he stood between all 6 Kumo nin and an unconscious Hinata. Harem was off to the side, being pinned down and fending off her two molesters as best she could. As soon as the fight started, 4 of the Kumo nin had taken out Hinata while the other 2 kept him and Harem busy. Now he was low on chakra from fighting to keep his comrades safe, and he had been doing admirable until Harem got a little too far away and got captured. Now they were threatening to rape her and kill her in front of him if he didn't hand over the Hyuga girl, and he was torn as to what to do. The situation was taken out of his hands though when he heard the tearing of cloth. His head shot around to see that Harem's shirt was torn in half, displaying her small, bra-clad bust underneath. He felt his rage churning at the men who were assaulting his teammate, and his swarm shot out of him to attack them. No sooner had the insects left him did he realize the error of his first hasty action. A boot implanted itself in his side, launching him far from his team as he crashed into a nearby tree. He was dazed but managed to stand only to be kicked in the other direction. A game of human football started amongst the Kumo nin, and they laughed as Harem was nearly in tears from the anger she felt. Meanwhile, the remaining 2 Kumo nin were standing over their true prey. One was the man who had initially spoken to them, and the now obvious leader of the group. "Hey, I almost feel for her, not having the chance to feel this properly. You know, Omzo, if Raikage-sama hadn't given you permission to do this, I would kill you for even thinking such a thing. I mean, she's younger than my sister, for Kami's sake. Oh, shut up. If you're not going to let me enjoy this, then get the hell out of here." Omzo leaned down and released himself from the confines of his jeans. Then with a strong pull tore open Hinata's jacket, but the brief glimpse of her black shirt was all he would get to see as a knee suddenly made contact with his face. What the foo? He looked up just in time to dodge the sword strike aimed right at his manhood as he hastily pulled his pants back up while leaping away. Taking a few seconds, he looked around to take in the situation at hand. The blonde who had attacked him was checking the Hyuga's vitals with one hand while the other held out a ninjata towards him. The other girl was being helped back to her feet by a brunette who had seemingly knocked both of his countrymen off of their captive. The bug user was leaning against a tree holding his side while his two assailants were getting into a battle stance and glaring at the blonde who was now standing protectively over the Hyuga, signifying he was finished checking her. What do you want, boy? Get out of my way and maybe I'll let you have a chance or two at her friend over there. Of course you'll have to give your teammate to us in exchange, but I'd say that's a pretty good deal, wouldn't you? He swore he saw the boy's eyes flicker red for an instant. You attempted to rape my girlfriend and you're now trying to ask me to step aside and let you continue. Not only that, but you want me to give up Haku-chan too. You must be insane to think I would let you. Naruto snarled at Omzo, changing his stance slightly by bringing his sword in front of him. You say I'm insane. I'm not the one outnumbered. You came with one little girl, and if I recall correctly, she is your only teammate. Even if the other team were in top condition, you'd still be outnumbered. Give it up, boy, your girlfriend is no longer yours, she belongs to Kumo. He signaled to his comrades and they charged the newly arrived genin. He, along with the two that had been playing with Shino, went after Naruto, while the other three went for Haku and Harem. Naruto took 2 steps forward and leapt over the attack, throwing kunai as they ran under him. All three blocked and spun to attack once more, but the little diversion gave Naruto all the time he needed as 10 Kage Bunshin popped up around him, already charging their attackers. Cursing, the 3 Kumo nin jumped back and each started a set of hand seals. They attacked in unison, calling out, Reikyu, as 3 balls of lightning shot out at what each thought was the original Naruto, but were all caught off guard when the 3 targets they attacked burst into smoke. Shit, Kage Bunshin. That's not a genin level trick. There were now 7 clones left surrounding them. The Kumo nin brought out their weapons to face off as they would have no time at this range to do another jutsu. Instead they attacked in formation. 2 attackers on a Bunshin while 1 guarded their back. It was slow work, but they were progressing. On the other side of the clearing, Haku and Harem were more evenly matched with numbers if not skill. Haku had already incapacitated the female nin that attempted to attack first. She had a bigger mouth than her skill could back up and was taken out quickly with a few well-placed Senbon. She was alive, but all she could do was watch. The 2 men on the other hand were more cautious. Serves that bitch right for thinking she could push her way through just because her father is on the council. Maybe it'll teach the brat that wealth means nothing if you don't have the strength to back it up. At the word strength he brought his own weapon out. A large war hammer that had no place in a ninja fight, yet he seemed to wield it with ease, reminding Haku of Zabuza and his Kubikiri Hako. This action, however, did not impress his opponents. You should use something lighter. A mallet perhaps. It's quicker than that club. All that thing will do is weigh you down. Harem stated bluntly as she took out her jute, making both the Kumo nin laugh. This is no place to play cops and robbers, girly. Mallet Man's teammate whipped out a kama and threw it at the girl's weapon, causing her to lose her grip and drop it. Especially when you can't even keep hold of the weapon. Harem casually bent down and picked up the kama from its place on the ground as she swung the jute back into her grip with the rope that was wound around her forearm. I didn't drop it. I let it slack so the sickle would fall at my feet. Now I have one of your weapons while mine is still with me. She fixed him with a steady glare as she held her jute in one hand and the newly acquired kama in the other. She was determined to get back at this one as he was the one who bared her chest. An unforgivable act in her books. The man just smirked. Okay, so you got one of my kama, but don't get cocky yet. Moving his hands behind his back, he brought out 2 more of the weapons. Lesson 1. Always bring spares. Lesson 2. Always bring muscle. The mallet man rose his hammer over his shoulder. Lesson 3. Always bring speed. With that the 2 shot forward towards the girls. Haku just stood there with Harem on guard. Lesson 4. Watch your footing. As she said this, both men put another foot down only to have it slide out from under them. They crumpled to the ground, but their momentum kept them moving forward and they were now on a collision course with the two kunoichi. One that both ladies took full advantage of as they used their weapons with practiced grace to incapacitate the men. The three kumo nin were frustrated. It was taking longer than they expected to finish off all these clones, and the scary part was that Kage Bunshin were weaker than their creator by far. They eventually got down to the last one and breathed a sigh of relief as they all stabbed into it from a different direction. At least until they heard two words from above them. Bunshin Debakua. The clone exploded, sending all three nin in different directions. Naruto gave them no time to recover though, as he created more clones and sent them after the kumo nin. The woman and one of the men were already down for the count, or worse, and gave him no problems. Onzo, however, was lucky enough to land in a bush. He staggered out and got into a stance, quickly kicking away the two Bunshin that tried to take him down. As he finished, the real Naruto landed in front of him. So you're still alive. Lucky you. Yeah, lucky me and unlucky you, punk. I'm going to kill you in the worst way possible, then I'm going to rape your little girlfriends over and over until they beg for more. Then I'll kill them. Well, all but the Hyuga. Raikage-sama will reward me greatly when I take her back. He began to laugh even as blood started coming out of his mouth. He wiped it away as an afterthought and got ready to charge the boy. Naruto, however, relaxed his stance and just stood there looking at him. Giving up. Good choice, boy. For making it easy, I'll make it quick, well, quicker. No, I'm not giving up. There is just no need for me to fight you anymore. What do you mean? I'm still standing, and as long as I'm standing, I will hunt you. I promise you that you will not see the end of this day. Empty threats from a man who is already dead. Naruto switched his focus behind the man. Onzo spun quickly to catch whoever was sneaking up on him. The boy made an amateur mistake in letting him know someone was there, but when he looked, he didn't see anyone. No, he didn't see anyone. But he felt them. He felt them so much he thought he would explode from the pain. He had gotten part of his wish though, as the little Hyuga girl had touched his package by her own choice. Unfortunately, she did it with a Juken strike. That's for thinking you could do such things to me without my permission. The now awake Hinata spat in his face before sending a Juken to each of his joints, sending him to his knees while his arms fell limply at his sides. That's for thinking you could threaten my Naruto-kun without consequence, and this is for being one of the most vile beings on the face of the planet. Without so much as batting an eyelash, she sent one of her strongest Juken strikes at the man's face. She felt the impact, the chakra release, and the resulting twitch of the face in her hand. She watched as the man's head snapped backwards. Blood began to ooze from his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Then he simply went limp and fell forward on his face, and it was over. Hinata stood there over her first kill, not quite sure what to do, until two arms enveloped her and a body blocked her view. She attempted to fight off the new attack, but she was in a daze and couldn't think properly. The body brought her closer as she tried to push away. The person was saying something, but it sounded like they were talking through water. She looked at their face, but it was blurry. Shaking her head, she tried to clear her thoughts. A man had attempted to rape her and she killed him. No, she didn't just kill him, she decimated his body, then assassinated his helpless form. She fell to her knees. She couldn't breathe. She was a killer now, no a murderer. She had killed a man in cold blood. What would her friends think of her now? What would Naruto think of her? She began to sob as the arms around her tightened. She didn't care anymore, she wanted this feeling to end, so she tugged on the arms, trying to get them to crush her faster, but oddly they felt gentle. Almost like they weren't attacking her but rather, hugging her. She looked up again at the person's face, but her eyes were still blurry. Bringing an arm up, she wiped her eyes and found them to be wet with tears, but when she pulled her arm away she could see a bit better. She was looking into a face she knew so well. One that she now expected to see loathing in, but instead there was only concern. Hinata. Hinata. Breath. Naruto patted her on the back. She was getting lightheaded, but eventually, with great effort and the help of Naruto's hand on her back, she took a deep breath. It seemed foreign to her, like she hadn't taken one in ages, but when she did, she smelled the familiar scent of her boyfriend and it helped to calm her down. She now latched onto him with a death grip that was no doubt causing him pain as her body was racked with sobs. It's okay, Hinata. It's over now. Let it all out. He rubbed her back as she cried into his chest and whispered comforting words in her ears. It took nearly a half an hour, but she eventually cried herself to sleep. When he noticed her breathing even out, he picked her up bridal style and walked her over to where Shino, Harem and Haku were leaning against a tree watching them. Setting Hinata down, he turned his back to them and then looked at their captives. 2 male and 2 female Kumo nin. His Bunshin were standing guard and already going through the ninja's belongings, much to their obvious disapproval. Especially the women when he searched some of their more private locations. Causing Haku and Harem to get red-faced, though from embarrassment or anger one couldn't be certain. As his clones worked, he walked over to the ninja and crouched in front of them. Tell me your purpose. They all glared at him, determined to not be the one to break first and have to explain to the Raikage later why his plans were now known. Naruto sighed at their determination. Well, I wanted to do this the easy way, but since you've decided that you're all suddenly mute, I'll have to show you my cure for that. He turned back to his friends. Killing is one thing, but this is something you may not want to witness. If you have a weak stomach, I won't blame you for going elsewhere. They nodded, unsure of what he meant, but saw the look of sorrow in his eyes. Anything that he didn't want to do that much was sure to be an interesting and horrifying spectacle. They strengthened their resolve, however, and nodded for him to continue. Naruto sighed. He knew this was going to leave scars, and not the kind that could be seen. Ha! What does a gaki like you think he can do to get us to talk? You're still a little too wet behind the ears to talk that big. The mallet man scoffed. Even though he was bound and guarded, he still felt little threat from his captors. They had just gotten lucky, that's all. Naruto glanced back at the man. He was large and bulky. He absently wondered if he would be the first one to break. Taking a scroll from his pouch, he slowly unraveled it to reveal words above seals. They read out as Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and so on, but they couldn't see how far the stages went as the scroll was still mostly rolled up and only the first 5 seals could be seen. Hovering his hand over the first one, he channeled his chakra and soon had a set of extremely thin needles in his hand. He smiled as the Kumo nin laughed at him. What are you going to do with those little things, Gaki? Sew us some new clothes. Naruto just ignored the man and looked back at Shino and Haku. This one will be most useful to the two of you. Shino, your insects can use their pincers, though they won't penetrate as deep. You have quantity. Haku, you have your sanban. That said, he turned back around and with agonizingly slow motions he stuck the needles into the ninja in front of him. They soon had needles sticking out of all their finger joints, their elbows and their jaws. They scoffed at him once more. Wow, you're such a great torturer. This is more like therapeutic acupuncture, boy. I might as well get some sleep. The female ninja didn't get to finish as Naruto took out a sanban of his own and twanged a single needle on each of them, and she soon joined her comrades in screaming. Every time they screamed, though, the pain increased. What the hell was that? She managed to cough out before another wave of pain raced overwhelmed her. The human body is never completely still, especially when emotional. In this case, that emotion is pain. The needles in your body are set at points that have very little space between the joints. As soon as you started moving, they started shifting, and with the pins in the way, nerves were constantly crushed and released. When your body goes through its natural reactions, more movements are made and more pain is introduced. He said this as he paced in front of them, every now and then flicking a random pin to keep their movement going. He stole a glance at his friends to see that they were wide-eyed and visibly uncomfortable, but otherwise paying attention. Save for Hinata, who was still asleep. After 10 minutes he began to pull the pins out one by one until they were all back in his hand, and then he resealed them. The Kumo nin were sore, but still determined, though one of the women looked like she was about to cry. Sighing again, he moved his hand over the second seal and pushed chakra into it. Out popped 2 small jars and a scalpel. One jar held a black tar-like liquid while the other looked to be crystal clear water. The male ninja who had used the kama was still trying to be brave. So now we get an oil massage to go with our acupuncture. The grin on Naruto's face promised them only the worst as the women tried to force their bodies not to crawl away from the blonde. Naruto held the clear jar up in front of him. This is a highly corrosive acid. It's considered highly corrosive not for an ability to eat through something fast, but rather that it can eat through almost anything, but it does so very, very slowly. The only problem is that if it falls on unbroken skin it's ineffective. He placed the jar on the ground in front of them and their eyes followed it warily as he showed them the second jar. This is the only known counter for it. Once you are ready to talk I'll stop the acid with this. He went down the line and knocked each one to their back before lifting shirts off their stomachs. He went to each one then and made a tiny incision about 2 centimeters above their navels before dripping 1 drop of the clear fluid onto them. At first there was no action at all. Then they felt uncomfortable, then after half a minute they began writhing before suddenly renewing their screams in an even higher pitch than before. They began to mentally curse the heavens and their country for sending them on this mission as they felt the acid wreaking havoc on their bodies. The odd part was that it was only a drop on their stomach, yet it felt like their body was on fire and something was literally eating its way through them. They had expected it to end like the needles had, but to their dismay Naruto got up and started walking over to his paling friends. That was too much for the daughter of the council member as she began to cry and plead for the pain to stop. Naruto turned to her. Will you give me the information I want? Despite the screaming of her 2 male comrades that they would kill her if she gave in and that she was the slut daughter of her council parents, she nodded as she gritted her teeth. As her female companion collapsed, apparently having too much torture for her inexperienced body. She still shook violently though before Naruto smeared the tar-like substance on all of them and their yelling turned to groaning after a couple more minutes. When they had settled enough Naruto knelt in front of the female. Tell me, why are you here? She ignored the glares and shouts of her companions and looked at him. To get the Byakugan. Okay, that much I figured out. Why the 6 of you? Why not a Jonin or a full-blown raid? Still sobbing a bit she looked down. Raikage-sama F found out there would be 2 Hyuga in this year's exams. He decided to send us in order to acquire it by any means. Onzo was chosen to breed the F female and steal her away. Okay, I get that part, but why are you 2 kunoichi here? Don't you despise the raping of an innocent girl? Again the woman turned her head away. We had another purpose. Once the girl was secured we were to find the male. And take turns with him. 3 Byakugan kids from 1 trip to the Chunin exams was worth 2 kunoichi and repercussions from Konoha for kidnapping if they were even able to prove anything, since we were instructed to kill anyone accompanying the 2 and kill the boy after we were done with him. I see, so this was all just to sat your cage's lust for a bloodline. Had we met under better circumstances I may have pitied you. Shino walked over from his resting spot to address the kunoichi. Well, since that is over with, there is one more thing to do. Harem, join us over here please. The girl stood and hesitantly made her way over as Naruto sealed up his torture supplies and stored the scroll away. There is something that I need to ask of both of you. It will be an invaluable lesson in the future, but you will hate me for it now. He slowly ushered them over to the 2 male kumo nin before pulling the 2 men to their knees. You are going to kill these 2 men for the attempted raping and kidnapping of a Konoha ninja. An offense that is punishable by death. Both of them stared at him. Harem looked horrified at the though while Shino was more calculating. Naruto-san, would it not be wiser to send them to interrogation? Yes Shino, it probably would be, but right now you both need this experience and we have 2 willing individuals right here. Plus those 2 females will still be alive. The 2 men began to scream insults trying to hide their fear of impending doom. Shino moved first as he limped over and pulled out a lone tag. The man screamed at him, telling him he didn't have the guts to kill. That he was weak and an insignificant insect. It was funny to Shino to be called an insect and he mused over it in his head before applying the tag to the center of the man's chest. He backed away and made a single ram sign. The man twitched violently, then stared blankly forward with his mouth open in a silent scream. The other Kumo ninja were confused until the man's weight and lack of muscle support pulled him face down towards the ground. Out of his back a half-meter wooden spike stood covered in still wet blood from its recent trip through the man's heart. To the side, Shino vaguely registered the still awake females retching before turning back to the tree and walking behind it where he mimicked the action. Naruto looked at Harem, who had watched what happened with the first man. She was now staring at the second, who was staring steely back at her with clear hate in his eyes. Her knees were shaking almost as bad as her hands as she adjusted and readjusted the grip on her wakizashi. If you're going to do it, bitch, then get it over with. I don't got all day. The ninja smiled at her, and she could tell he knew that one way or another his life was forfeit. Closing her eyes, she placed the point of her blade at his throat. Then, taking a deep breath, she thrust. There wasn't as much resistance as she thought though, and she opened her eyes thinking she had missed. She suddenly wished she hadn't though, as she looked straight into his eyes as he spurted up one last gout of blood before his eyes glazed over and he slid backwards off her blade. She felt sick and collapsed to her knees. It was cruel of Naruto to make her do this. Too cruel, and he was right. She hated him for it. She loathed him and wanted to beat him to a pulp because of it, yet at the same time she knew it had to happen at some point. Better it happen now than in a real fight where she might freeze up from the shock. Naruto slowly walked over to her and helped her to her feet. She didn't have the willpower to resist him right now as he led her to the tree that Shino was now resting against and placed her next to him before crouching in front of them. You both did surprisingly well. I expected as much from Shino, but Harem, you didn't hesitate as much as I thought you would. You make it sound so simple. You must have killed a lot to make it sound so easy. Harem glared at him with the corners of her eyes blurring. Yes, I have killed many times, but it is never easy. Taking a life, no matter if it's the first or the 100th, it's still taking a life, and that is never easy. In our line of work though, it's kill or be killed, and as such we can only do our best to survive and hope that those we cut down deserve their death or that they find peace wherever we sent them. Both of his friends nodded as Haku came over. He's right, you know. Had we not killed them, they would have tried again as soon as they were able. If we sent them to interrogation, they would have been in for a lot more pain, and then they probably would have been killed anyway. Think of it as saving them from that torture. Does it make what you did any better? No, but reasoning it out sometimes makes it hurt less. They nodded again before Harem looked at the two kunoichi and the remaining shinobi. What about them? Naruto turned to where she was looking. The one who talked will stay here for now. If she went back to Kumo, they would kill her for turning traitor. Best to let them simmer for a while until we find out it's safe for her. The girl looked relieved when she heard that. We will still have to turn her into interrogation though once they find out she didn't leave with her team. She stiffened but was resigned to her fate. With any luck she'll get off easy since her parents seem to hold a high office in Kumo. The other one will be sent back along with their sensei and a message of warning not to try again or they will lose more than just a few ninja. His eyes hardened as he walked over to the two kunoichi and untied them. You will carry her out and take her to one of the proctors. After that you will tell them what you told me and what I told you. Let them know that I will discuss with the Hokage what to do with you once this exam is over. Until then they can detain you but are not to touch you. Hi. She stood up as she struggled with her unconscious comrade and kept her eyes on the ground. She had failed her mission horribly and cracked under pressure. It was torture, sure, but she was ashamed that she was the first to break. She looked back toward the konoha nin, keeping her eyes to the ground. I can never go back now. They would kill me when they found out what happened. For now just go get some rest and be thankful you didn't last longer. I would have hated to have had to disfigure you or the one in your arms. He smiled as she turned and walked off into the trees. We have our 2 sets of scrolls thanks to this little situation and the team that Haku and I ran into. We also have an extra heaven scroll as a bargaining chip should we need one. He showed them the acquired scrolls before handing the one teammate needed to Shino, who accepted it with a nod in thanks. From here on we'll make a straight line for the tower. We'll need to keep an eye out for ambushes and traps, so we'll take it slow. I would rather arrive on time and in one piece than not arrive at all. Getting nods of agreement, he picked up Hinata once more before they took off towards the center of the forest, leaving the bodies of the Kumo nin to rot on the floor like so many other failed candidates before them. Chapter 13. In the forest. 3 days later found teams 8 and 10 bounding through the forest, keeping a solemn watch for anything out of the ordinary. Hinata had recovered from her shock enough to function, but they could all tell she was still distraught over what happened. Naruto explained to her everything that went on while she was so blissfully unaware, and she was thankful that she didn't have to see her love torture someone. That thought was only solidified when she saw the blanching faces of her teammates as they recalled the events. She was also grateful that she wasn't the only one who had killed, and felt like she and her teammates bonded a little more, though in a grim way, from all having their first kills that same day. The only kill that wasn't a first was from Naruto, whose kill had died when he hit a tree after the clone exploded, breaking his neck. In their brief travel they managed to take out 2 more teams and dissuade another from engaging with such a large group, and as such they now had a full extra set of scrolls with an earth scroll on the side. They had all felt a large chakra presence the day before, but shrugged it off so long as it stayed away from them. Now, traveling through the treetops, they saw what looked like a small clearing ahead with a few people in it. Naruto turned to the others and whispered out to them, "We'll take a closer look, but keep yourselves hidden and don't engage unless I say." They nodded to him and jumped as close as they dared, taking up positions on one side of the clearing, far above the gathering. Down below they saw the 3 sound genin facing off against Ino, Shikamaru and Choji as they stood between the sound team and Sakura, who was looking rather worn and beaten. They couldn't hear too well what the exchange was, but it eventually led to a bit of a scuffle in which it seemed the sound genin were out for blood. The fight progressed until a couple more Konoha genin showed up. One Tenten and the other Neji. Naruto could tell just from Neji's stance and attitude that he was almost as much a prick as Sasuke, but before the two could engage, Neji smirked. "Looks like we won't have to," they heard him say as a lone figure crawled out of a hollowed section of a tree. "Sakura, who did that to you?" the Uchiha asked as he made his presence known. A dark aura of purple smoke seemed to drift off his body while odd marks shifted over his skin. Sakura was beside herself with glee that Sasuke was thinking about her. She was so caught up in the moment that she forgot to answer him, but that didn't matter. "Ha. I did. What are you going to do about it, Uchiha?" The guy that had been blowing wind out of his palms stepped forward with an evil smile. "Zaku, you idiot!" The bandaged one yelled at him, but before either of them could react, Sasuke was already going through hand signs and blew out several balls of fire. "I'll smash him to bits, Dosu." "Zankaha!" Zaku cried out, extinguishing the flames only to reveal the shuriken hidden inside of them. He quickly threw a guard up to lessen the blow. "Zaku! Behind you!" Again it came too late as Zaku's arms were pulled painfully behind his back while Sasuke planted a foot on his spine. "You seem very proud of these arms." Sasuke grinned and pulled slowly, reveling in the other boy's pain as he pulled the arms out of their sockets and tore the tendons. They could see Sakura practically drooling at this point as she saw the power of her Sasuke-kun. Naruto whispered to those still hidden, "Something isn't right. There's no way he's that powerful, and those marks." They all agreed but didn't move as Naruto hadn't given them any signal to. "Shino, Hinata, what can you tell me about him? He seems to have a different chakra going through him. His system can't handle all of it and it's leaking out." Hinata looked astonished as she had never seen chakra pour out of someone like what was happening in front of them. "His chakra is tainted," Shino announced, only bringing up more questions in Naruto's mind. Back down in the clearing, the bandaged genin was frantically trying to reason with the Uchiha. His 2 teammates were down and he had little hope of winning with this new development. "Here, take our scroll and we will leave you be. I promise the next time we meet we will not run." Sasuke didn't seem to hear him as he was busy looking at his own hands and feeling the power rushing through them. Dosu took this as a good sign and gathered his team before making a hasty retreat, which Tenten and Neji took as their cue to grab their teammate and retreat as well. Sasuke looked up and was about to follow but found that 2 arms were wrapped around him. Sakura was hugging him from behind and pleading for him not to go. "Sakura, let go of me. I need to test my power." "No, you're not leaving me here. I want you to stay here with me, please." She begged him and he looked into her eyes. She wasn't looking at him with fear or sadness. No, it was something much more primal. She was looking at him with lust. "There are other ways to test this strength. If I breed one of these sluts with this power active, I'll have even stronger Uchiha under my command in the future." He spun on his heel and quicker than they could step away he had both Sakura and Ino under his arms and carried them to the hollow in the tree, making those gathered wonder what he was doing. They didn't have to wait long those as they heard tearing cloth follow by shrieking and giggling that could only be Sakura. Inside the hollow Ino could only watch as her former best friend was mauled savagely by their crush. She was no idiot, she knew that he planned on her being next. This is what I wanted, right? For Sasuke-kun to love me and to have his children. But what about dating? What about kissing and walking hand in hand down the street? This isn't romantic, this is disgusting. I don't want this. I don't want it. No. As she finished she tried to leave the hollow, but the only thing those outside saw was a streak of platinum blonde and a shriek as she was pulled forcefully back inside before she screamed. It stopped suddenly with the sound of flesh meeting flesh. Sasuke looked at her with what she could only describe as loathing. You will help me revive my clan. I, as the last Uchiha, demand it. Now take off your clothes or I will do it for you, just like I did with this other slut. Rubbing her cheek where Sasuke smacked her, Ino looked past him to Sakura, who was moaning, but from pleasure or pain she couldn't tell. Either way the girl was smiling. The only thing she could tell was that he hadn't used her yet since she still had her panties on. He had stopped himself long enough to grab her and force her back inside. She began to sob. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. He was supposed to love me, not this. She looked at him and saw a promise of pain in his eyes as he took a kunai from his pouch and stabbed it into the wood by her head. Tears fell as she slowly began to remove articles of clothing, starting with her top and skirt. Up in the trees Naruto had a clear view of what had transpired and he was furious. He warned Kiba about taking such actions, but it seemed he should have warned the Uchiha as well. He saw Sakura was practically in heat, but Ino didn't look the part. That suspicion was confirmed when he saw her trying to escape only to be drawn back inside the hollow while everyone else stared at it in shocked silence. Damn it. Naruto shot out of the tree, breaking everyone's days as his friends soon followed. Once they landed, Naruto wasted no time as he took off towards the hollow. Ino was now down to her panties just like Sakura and had full-blown streams running down her face as Sasuke reached out and roughly grabbed her exposed breasts. He handled them with no sigh of gentleness, bringing more tears from her as well as yelps of pain, but he didn't care. He only had one thing on his mind, and that was to breed and gain more power. Retrieving his kunai from the tree, he moved to slice open the girl's last piece of clothing. The sound of rushing feet stopped him as he looked out towards the clearing and snarled, scaring Ino and making Sakura's panties darken from the dampness that now permeated them. Naruto. Sasuke snarled as both girls were forgotten and he rushed out from the tree towards the object that his hatred for was only overshadowed by his hatred for his brother. Naruto saw the boy coming at him with his Sharingan blazing and the strange black marks still covering half his body. They met halfway across the clearing in a clash of fists faster than their onlookers could follow. When they separated, the small crowd could see that neither had landed a hit. Sasuke smirked as he looked around the clearing at the new arrivals. Oh, how thoughtful of you, Dobi. You brought more breeding stock for me. I'll make sure to thank you properly after they've all been bedded. That is, if you survive. If you lay one hand on any of them, I will knock your ass back to the council chamber and let them hear that you tried to rape your fellow Konoha ninja during the exam. I'm sure the Hokage would love that. Ha. The council would pat me on the back for starting my clan's revival so soon, and then there would be nothing your precious old man could do about it. In fact, maybe after I'm done here I'll go and kick him off his throne and take his title for myself. Sasuke grinned at the thought of taking the Dobi's dream away from him, but couldn't resist pouring a little salt in the wound, so he pointed directly at Hinata. And I'll make sure she is first to sit on my lap. Quote. Everyone was astonished that Sasuke just admitted to not only wanting to overthrow the Hokage, but also wanting to rape all the girls present. Well, all but Sakura, whose moans could still be heard every once in a while. What's the matter, Dobi? Afraid that I might be a better man for your little girlfriend? Kiba had just returned to the clearing in time to hear Sasuke's threats against Hinata's innocence. You bastard. You said we're going to take him out together and that I would get Hinata. He ran at Sasuke but was batted away like a fly. Shut up, mutt. Know your place. Everyone was backing up to the edges of the clearing now. They could feel the dangerous aura welling up, but it wasn't coming from Sasuke. You couldn't leave well enough along, could you, Uchiha? Sasuke turned back towards Naruto to see that his face was hidden by his hair and he was standing stock still with an oppressive chakra leaking from him. Oh, so you grew some balls since I last saw you, huh? Too bad they still won't be enough to satisfy your little Hyuga or the ice bitch, but don't worry, I'll take good care of them for you. Sasuke entered his fighting stance and got ready for the inevitable clash as Naruto just stood there. Come on, Dobi. Don't chicken out now. You see, you whores. He doesn't even have the nerve to come at an Uchiha. I'll just have to go to him. Sasuke ran full speed at the blonde and executed a perfect flying roundhouse to his head only to hit nothing but air. As he came down, he saw Naruto appear beside him, but before he could react, the boy batted him to the side just like he had done to Kiba moments before. Don't question what you know nothing about, Tem. Again Naruto disappeared only to show up once again above Sasuke's head. The Uchiha dodged the axe kick in time, thanks to his eyes, but missed the follow-up double-fisted hammer that pounded him into the dirt as Naruto completed his flip. He wasn't given a second to collect his thoughts though, as he was roughly picked up by the back of his clothes and thrown sideways into a tree, causing it to dent and crack. Those still watching the fight stood rooted as they watched the show of raw power. None of them realized though that Naruto hadn't even begun to show his real strength. For one, he still had his weight seals on. Neither had he unsheathed a blade or used any jutsu. It was raw power, and the only ones who could have really appreciated it were the teammates of the spandex-wearing wonder, all three of which were no longer there. Naruto walked over to the tree that Sasuke was now climbing out of and brought some pieces of paper out of his pouch. He quickly slapped them on the Uchiha and watched as the black marks started to recede. So it's chakra-based and seems to be originating at his neck. He waited until all the marks flowed back towards the cursed mark, then removed the seals, leaving a wobbling Sasuke behind him as he walked away. Get back here, Dobi. Don't run away from me. Give me back my power. Sasuke put an arm on Naruto's shoulder to stop him and was rewarded with an unforgiving fist to the face, causing him to sprawl out on the ground unconscious from the force of the blow as well as his sudden lack of chakra. Sakura, having heard her precious Avenger's cry, rushed out of the hollow towards him. As she saw Naruto walking away from her love, it was blatantly obvious what happened. Naruto Baka must have used a sneak attack on him. How dare he do such an underhanded thing to Sasuke-kun? She swung out at him as she passed, but was soon laying out next to her little boy toy even faster than she expected due to a leg swipe by her intended target. Naruto didn't even break his stride, nor did he even seem concerned about what he had done to the almost naked girl, as he walked over to the hollow. As soon as he got inside, he saw a wide-eyed and shaking Ino plastered against the back of the cave as she seemingly tried to meld with the root system. Once she saw it was him that came in and not her prior assailant, she rushed across the hollow and into his arms. He could have been an enemy ninja at this point and she wouldn't have cared, just as long as he wouldn't do what the Uchiha had. She had seen most of what Naruto had done to the brat through blurry eyes, and most of it had amazed her since she had never seen him so strong. Even when he had acted out in the classroom right before team selection, he hadn't actually done anyone real harm. She watched as much as she could though from her perch against the tree, and she had to admit she would have been impressed if she wasn't so scared. Even when he tripped Sakura, he did it with so little effort, and even his eyes had never left their target. The whole time he walked, he seemed to be staring right at her. What was this feeling that she couldn't shake? She couldn't breathe right and she felt hot, but it wasn't fear. It wasn't until he had entered the small, semi-private area that she felt the full weight of what had happened wash over her, and she suddenly desired to hold on to something, anything that she could, to feel that she wasn't alone. That thing just happened to be Naruto. The boy stood rather embarrassed as Ino latched onto him. He had barely moved into the area when she practically jumped on him and started crying into his shoulder, but that didn't bother him. No, it was that she had done so in nothing but her panties. It wasn't difficult for him to figure out what had happened, or was about to happen, inside this area, and he suddenly wondered just how often he would end up saving a girl from being nearly raped. After all, he was already at 2 for this exam. Turning his head towards the cave entrance, he called outside and hoped those that he wanted to hear would hear him shout. Hinata. Harem. Come in here please. The rest of you stay out unless you want to be sent to Dreamland. They soon heard rushed footsteps as the three girls came into the hollow and saw Ino hugging him tightly. At first Haku and Hinata were a bit angry, but then they recalled the tearing sounds, and the screaming, the actions of Sasuke and Sakura. They came up to the pair and slowly peeled Ino off of Naruto, being careful to keep her modesty as best they could, though they hadn't needed to, as Naruto had screwed his eyes shut as soon as they started separating. Once he was freed, he turned his back to them before addressing them. Get her dressed and try to calm her down a little. I need to go deal with the rest. He didn't wait for their approval as he left to see how the others were doing. Out in the clearing, Kiba was busy kicking the downed Uchiha. While the unconscious Sakura held onto him tightly, moving in time with the motions his body was involuntarily making. In a word, the whole scene was rather disgusting to him. Not that Kiba was kicking his downed teammate, that part he found hilarious, but the pink-topped bitch's blind devotion to the raven-haired boy was what he found sickening. What kind of person gets off on being nearly raped, then tries to go back for more? He motioned Kiba over as he walked to Shino, Shikamaru and Choji. The dog boy gave one last kick before reluctantly joining the other guys. The first questions were of course about the missing Ino, which Naruto was reluctant to answer. He left it at that she was a bit abused and that they shouldn't bring it up with her until she's had a chance to speak to a specialist. To his comfort, her teammates seemed to understand and nodded that they wouldn't bring the issue up. What do we do with the other two then? Kiba asked with a slight scowl. He was now the only conscious member of Team 7 and it didn't look like the other two would be getting up anytime soon. We'll have to take them to the tower with us. That or you can stay here until they wake up and try to get another scroll in order to pass. He watched as Kiba huffed and stomped off, clearly not happy with either option. He then turned to Shikamaru. Which scroll does your team have? A simple comment, but it immediately put both Choji and Shikamaru on edge. They were ready to fight over their scroll no matter what, even though the boy in front of them had just taken out Sasuke with hardly any effort. Recognizing their actions, Naruto immediately put his hands up in a placating manner. No. I meant that we have extras. Which do you have so that we can give you to other? To prove his point, he pulled out 4 scrolls, all different. Shikamaru scanned over Naruto, but nothing in his actions or posture suggested that he was up to anything, and it was too good an opportunity to pass up. He cautiously reached out and grabbed one of the earth scrolls and examined it. Finding nothing obviously wrong, he stuffed it into his pouch. Why are you helping us, Naruto? We're Konoha ninja. We need to look out for one another. What about me? Why do they get free scrolls and I get nothing? Kiba was back with a vengeance and looked the part as he came stomping back over to them. Naruto cursed the Inuzuka's enhanced hearing even if it wasn't as good as his own. Because Kiba, unlike your team, Team 10 has never tried to attack me, beat me, kill me or take anything precious to me from me. Your team on the other hand beat and insulted me numerous times, attacked me without reason, and Sasuke tried to kill me, even if it was indirectly, as well as take away my possessions. Just be thankful I don't take the scroll that those sound genin left behind. Now, unless you want to fail the exam, I suggest you try to wake up your 2 friends and start looking for the other one you need. Kiba of course saw the easiest place to get the scroll he needed as being right in front of him. All 3 teams that were present had full sets of scrolls thanks to Naruto. The only problem was there were 4 of them, plus the 3 in with Ino. 8-on-1 odds was not something he would even try to take on his best of days. Just wait till we're alone dead last. I'll show you just what I've learned since we last fought. Kiba turned on his heel and once again stalked off to his teammates, knowing that they had precious little time to find their last scroll. As Kiba went to his team, Harem came out of the hollow. She's okay, but she's shaken. We should probably start moving soon to get her mind off things. Naruto nodded to her. Naruto, she wants to talk to you. Not right now since I told her we would be leaving soon, but she wanted you to know that she's sorry. Sorry. For what? I don't know, she wouldn't say without starting to sob. Okay, well, we're bringing Team 10 along with us. I don't want to risk anything happening on the way to the tower. Get the others and we'll go. What about Team 7? They still need to get a scroll, and I'm not giving them handouts. They're on their own. Seems fair to me. Harem shrugged, truly not caring after what she'd seen Team 7 do. As she left to gather the women, Choji turned to Naruto. You really don't like them, do you? Would you like people who think they deserve everything without any work and try to pull their social status over you every chance they get? No, I don't like them. It's long past time they learn that they are ninja just like us, and as such they can't pull rank when there is no rank to pull. Choji grinned. Glad I'm not the only one who thinks that. It's good to know that you're on our side too, Naruto. Shikamaru always thought you were holding something back. Naruto quirked an eyebrow at the lazy genin who just smirked in return. It's pretty obvious when we consider that you could prank various ranking ninja on your own, and get away with it. The Nara said offhandedly. I just couldn't tell exactly how good you really were. Once the girls were assembled, the group was off once again, leaving a seething Kiba still trying to revive his teammates as he tried to think of how they could get their second scroll. All of the Konoha rookie teams arrived at the tower on the fourth day, save Team 7, allowing those that finished early to rest until the end of the exam. Naruto decided that this would be as good of a time as any to scout out other teams that passed trials of the forest. He roamed the halls for a while as the other Konoha genin decided to make full use of the tower's facilities to get cleaned, fed and rested. He was currently in one of the upper halls, that very few teams had made the effort to get to since there were so many stairs on the way, when he heard the all too familiar sounds of someone getting beaten. Running down the hall, he didn't have to listen hard to figure out which room his target was in as the screams easily penetrated through the door. He walked up a bit slower, so as not to alert those inside that they had an audience just yet, and put an ear to the door to clear up some of the more muffled talking coming from inside. You're pathetic, kin. If we didn't need you to get through this damn exam, we would have already killed you days ago. Consider yourself lucky that you're getting off with this and pray that you die before Orochimaru-sama gets to you. Maybe if you're not lucky enough to escape him, you'll have the pleasure of knowing what it's like to be one of his experiments, firsthand. Naruto heard a small girlish whimper. Yeah, bitch. Slap. But that doesn't mean we won't have a little fun with you in the meantime. Maybe if we train you properly now, Orochimaru-sama will overlook our team's failure because of your idiocy. Slap wham. The sounds of the girls beating were easily distinguishable from the outside, and it made Naruto want to vomit, recalling some of his own personal encounters with other people's appendages. But then there was that name again. Orochimaru. It seemed their long-lost traitor was finally found, somewhere. Obviously the two tormentors wouldn't spill the beans without damage, but just maybe their victim would. He made up his mind, and soon the door exploded into splinters, making those inside that could shield themselves from the onslaught of wooden projectiles. What Naruto found was nothing he would ever want to see again. It seemed the two males from the sound team that attacked Team 7 were about to have their own fun with their female teammate, as she was tied up across a bed on all fours with pillows stuffed under her abdomen and a cloth gag now secured in her mouth. She didn't have on a single piece of clothing, and Naruto would have been laying on the floor out of embarrassment had he not seen the condition of her skin. All over her body there were numerous bruises, some fresh and bleeding, others old and yellow. All of them were far too reminiscent of times he wished he could have died, and he could see the same thing in her eyes, eyes that were pleading for him to help her. Either by saving her, or killing her. She didn't seem to care which. Sorry to ruin your fun, gentlemen, but I need to borrow your friend for a while. Naruto got into his taijutsu stance, knowing that they wouldn't let him just walk out with their teammate. Piss off, asshole. We're teaching this bitch a lesson. So unless you want to join in, I suggest you turn your ass around before we decide you are making us mad. Easy, Zaku. I wouldn't want you to hurt your arms any more than they already are. Said boy stiffened and hardened his eyes. How do you know about Zaku's arms? Dosu asked cautiously. And how do you know his name? Well, you see, I was overlooking your little fight with the Uchiha and I saw how nicely he smacked your partner around. Plus the fact that he is flinching every time they move is a pretty dead giveaway. I'm guessing you can't do your little palm tricks very well like that. Dosu smirked under his mask. So you know Zaku's attacks, but you don't know mine. Dosu got ready for battle as he stood between Zaku and Naruto, wriggling his arm free of his sleeve to show his weapon. Now I will show you the power of sound. Try to keep up. Dosu disappeared only to reappear right in front of Naruto already mid-swing. As the arm passed, Naruto knew something was wrong as soon as it happened. There was no way a guy that tried to stand toe-to-toe with Sasuke's reputation would miss. He took a precautionary step back and unsheathed his ninjutsu just in case a projectile came out of the strange weapon. Instead, what he got was a tingle in his ear and what felt like a light smack across his cheek. Dosu on the other hand chuckled. So it looks like you have some skill after all. I guess this will be a little more fun. Bringing his arm up, Dosu flicked it, making a quiet but high-pitched noise. One that Naruto picked up easily. But that wasn't all he picked up. There were small distortions in the air heading straight at him. Naruto dodged to the side and heard the glass on a picture behind him shatter. He took the chance to have a quick look at it and saw that where the point of the blast hit there was nothing left but sand. So this is what his kabuto. No wonder he lost his lunch. He turned back to the smirking sound ninja. That's a nifty attack, I admit, but against someone like me it's worthless. And yet you cowered in the treetops when we fought Uchiha Sasuke. Actually, I was hoping you'd kill him. Naruto chuckled a bit, confusing the two boys. The Tem and I don't exactly see eye to eye on a lot of things. Had you stayed a bit longer though, you would have been able to see something interesting. We already know about the mark. I meant me beating the crap out of your target. Dosu and Zaku took a step back in surprise. I am impossible. Think what you want, but if you fight me now you will see just what I can do. Naruto once again took up a stance. This time Kenjutsu with his ninja parallel to the floor as he narrowed his eyes. Come on Dosu, he's gotta be bluffing. Why would he attack his own? These konoha nin are too soft for that. Zaku moved up to his teammate and swung an arm up to Dosu's shoulder, palm open and facing Naruto. The pain from the action was written across his face, but he kept his focus. Alright. Dosu shook himself out of his stunned state and readied a second attack. It's now 2-on-1. How long can you last? Naruto didn't even blink. 5 seconds. Well, at least you know your limits. Fine. In 5 seconds you will be begging for death. There was an explosion as Zaku released his Zenkaha at Naruto from feet away. Then it was almost a replay of their fight with Sasuke as Naruto appeared behind the two. I didn't mean you would beat me in 5 seconds. I meant that in 5 seconds you both would be taking a nice nap. He spun on his heel and ducked under the two attempts to swing at him, then followed through as the pommel of his sword struck them both in the side of the head, sending them into blissful darkness. They crumpled where they stood and didn't move other than the small signs of uneven breathing, showing that they were still among the living. This makes 3. Shaking his head, Naruto sheathed his ninjutsu as he walked over to Kin. Stopping at the bed closest to him, he picked up a sheet and held it in front of him as he walked to her, blocking his view of her displayed form. As his shins hit the bed she was tied to, he draped the sheet over her before tending to her bindings. Again he found evidence that this couldn't have been her first time being tied up, as there were bruises of at least 2 other types of bindings on her arms and legs. After she was freed, he removed her gag and helped her get slowly to her feet. She winced at each movement but eventually made it until she was upright and facing him. Kin looked down in shame. She was used to the humiliation from her teammates, but to be so exposed in front of a complete stranger who just saved her from a fate worse than the usual beating, was a bit too much. For some reason though, she felt a little angry that he hadn't offered to join in. A man strong enough to not only take out both of her teammates, but also take out the Uchiha that had apparently beaten them with ease when they weren't injured. It made her wonder if she was just too unattractive now that her body was ruined so many times. She barely registered that he had spoke to her and looked up into his eyes. Eyes that she had to take a step back from when she saw just how deep they were. Sure, she had seen her own eyes when she looked in the mirror, but hers were nowhere near as dead as his. What? I said, are you alright? Well, aside from the bruises. He sounded generally concerned for her. If you're well enough, I need you to answer some questions for me. So that was it. He was after information. I need to know about Orochimaru. And the worst information he could ask her to give. Well, she had already failed her lord. There was little hope for her now anyway. The least she could do would be to put the biggest kink in his plans that she could. He wants tea too. She choked. She couldn't do it after all and got ready for the interrogation techniques to begin as she screwed her eyes shut, but the pain never came. Instead, she heard his footsteps as he walked away and she opened her eyes. Get dressed, then meet me outside. It's not safe for you to stay with them. He kicked Dosu's heel as he passed to emphasize who he meant before closing the door behind him. She was surprised to see that both of her teammates were tied up, but not in any way that they couldn't get out of with a few minutes of work. He stood outside patiently as he waited for her to finish. It took a while, but eventually she emerged once again dressed in her ninja garb. Still wincing at most of her movements. Can you walk? I think I can limp. She answered sheepishly. Naruto nodded and picked her up carefully, before taking off down the hall. In minutes they were back outside the room that teams 8, 10 and 11 women were using. Setting Kin down, he knocked on the door and they waited as they heard shuffling inside. When the door opened, Kin was shocked to see a beautiful pale-eyed girl in a long shirt. Hinata, is everyone decent? After spending so much time around him, Hinata could easily recognize the urgency in his voice. She took a peek around the room inside where most of the girls were either cleaning weapons or reading. Yes, it's fine. I think I was the only one sleeping. Naruto smiled. Sorry for waking you, Hinata-chan. Naruto leaned over and kissed her, causing her to blush a little at being kissed in front of a stranger. When they parted, she let him in, alerting the others of their guests. Harem looked up from her weapons cleaning and raised an eyebrow. Another one, Naruto. Isn't two enough for you? Kin looked over to him as he scratched his head. Ladies, this is Kin. You may remember her as one of the sound team that attacked Team 7. Ino's head shot up from the bed that she was currently curled up on with a book and she glared at the newcomer. The girl was all too familiar with her as she could recall her brief mind switch with the girl. You. She narrowed her eyes and got up from her bed, pointing at the girl who shrunk behind Naruto, latching onto his arm in a death grip. Calm down, Ino. She was just through a rather traumatic event. She looks fine to me. Ino snuffed. She went through worse than you did recently. Naruto growled and Ino backed up from the harsh sound of his voice before putting her head down. I'm sorry, she whispered. Naruto sighed and ran a hand through his hair, slightly frustrated. Listen, I need you to keep her here with you while I go look for someone. We have a situation and I need to make sure the information she has gets to the right people, so I need you to keep her safe. Don't let anyone through that door unless it's myself, one of your teammates or your sensei. I don't care who they say they are. And if any of those people come, they are to stay here with you and help guard her. Is that clear? The urgency of his words caught them off guard and they quickly agreed. Good. Hinata. Haku, she's hurt. Take her to the bathroom and clean her up, please. I'll be back as soon as possible. After peeling Kin off his arm and handing her over to the care of his girlfriends, he was once again out the door. The girl looked lost standing in front of so many eyes. Eyes that she was sure were analyzing her. To Kin's surprise, it was Ino that came up to her first. She flinched under the girl's gaze but screamed out in pain when Ino hugged her tightly. Ino dropped her quickly, freaking out. I didn't do anything, I swear. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She tried to convince everyone as she fretted over the girl, trying to help her without touching her. Kin just sank to her knees crying as Hinata and Haku rushed over. The two looked her over, lifting up her shirt a bit before quickly dropping it as they blanched. Haku looked over to the now sobbing Ino. It's okay, Ino. She was beaten. You didn't know. It's not your fault. She didn't know if the words helped since Ino didn't stop crying. Instead, the amount of tears had increased when she saw the bruises. Haku and Hinata quickly but carefully helped Kin back to her feet and took her to the bathroom. They soon had her stripped once again, though she allowed them to do so reluctantly. They were appalled by the extent of her injuries but tried not to show it in case she wanted to cover up and not let them near her to start the healing. They used their limited healing jutsu on the cuts and bruises before applying some salves while drawing a bath. The salves would lessen the pain of the injuries when they started cleaning her off, as well as fight any possible infections. Once they had enough water, they began to sponge her down gently, being especially careful around her bruises and cuts. She flinched every now and then, but Kin knew that they were being as gentle as they could, so she just bit her lip and took the pain. It was a lot less than when she was getting beaten, and if she could survive that, she could survive this. About halfway through, Ino walked in, causing Kin to tense, but the girl just bowed low while whispering, "I'm sorry," and placed a new set of clothes on the counter. Kin could see the redness in her eyes as they looked at each other. He said I had it worse than her. Does that mean she was beaten recently? She was shaken from her thoughts though as Hinata and Haku lifted her and helped her into the bath to soak for a bit, each placing some kind of plant or another into the water around her. It was strange and she almost felt like they were preparing her for dinner, but once the aroma of the herbs reached her nose, she instantly felt her body relax, and was so dangerously close to slipping into sleep and falling under the water when she heard a light splash as Ino joined her in the tub while Hinata and Haku continued to prepare medicines. Ino rested herself against the inside of the tub before pulling Kin into her. The girl was far too weak to resist though, and settled for relaxing into the blonde-haired beauty. Ino rested her chin on Kin's shoulder, being careful not to touch any bruises this time, and began to tell her story into the Oto Kunoichi's ear in whispers. They both sobbed a little, but the overwhelming aroma of the bath took control and they simply rested against each other, and soaked. Haku and Hinata didn't let them rest too long though, as they were soon pulled out of their relaxation and Ino helped the other two apply more salve onto Kin. After they were finished and Ino and Kin were both dressed, they rejoined the rest of the group in the main room, finding Shino and Shikamaru now occupying it, as well as the two sat talking to Harem. Naruto was hard-pressed to find anyone he wanted to see. The arena was empty, no one was in the halls and even the cafeteria was bare. He was about to just ditch the exam and go straight to the Hokage, but just as he was about to leave the tower he heard a familiar voice call out to him. "Ma, Naruto-san, where are you going? If you leave now you automatically forfeit the exam, which means you and Haku would both fail. Don't make any hasty decisions please." Naruto turned in relief to see Kakashi leaning against the wall casually reading his book. "Ah, Kakashi-san, not who I was looking for, but you'll do." Kakashi lifted his head considering whether he should knock some sense into the boy for showing such disrespect, but decided now was not the time when he saw Naruto's face. "Listen, I need you to go to Hokage-sama as fast as you can and bring him here. I have important information that he needs to know. If he asks what it is, just tell him that I just gained a little insight to an old snake's whereabouts that he was looking for. Naruto, it might help if you were a little more descriptive. No time. Just go. He'll understand what I mean. When he gets here, tell him to come straight to room 205. I'll be waiting there until he shows, no matter how long it takes. Go." Kakashi would have normally put a genin in its place for demanding such a thing, but he had already experienced Naruto's abilities before. If nothing else, the boy was serious, so with a nod he shunshined out of the building and sped off towards the Hokage tower with his message as Naruto rushed back to the room that the Konoha ladies were residing in. When he arrived, he was relieved to see that everything was still in one piece and the girls along with Shino and Shikamaru were all talking, although in slightly hushed tones, while Choji sat nearby and munched on some chips. "Sorry I took so long, but I had a hell of a time finding someone that could help me. Kin, when the person I contacted comes, we're probably going to need to go to a different room for a little questioning." He saw the girl tense and her eyes began to water. "I won't let them do anything to you, and as long as you don't give them reason to, they won't hurt you, but you have to tell them everything you know." "Hi, Naruto-sama." Kin bowed before latching onto his arm and hiding behind his back partially, confusing everyone in the room. Kin had learned his name during Ino's little story and was grateful for their actions today, but while the rest of the people in the room had been unusually nice to her, he was ultimately the one that saved her from a fate worse than death and possibly death itself as well. As such, he was now her shield. Kin, Naruto is fine. You protected me when I thought no one would. Would you prefer Naruto Dono?" Now everyone was feeling a bit uncomfortable, especially Haku and Hinata. Naruto slowly peeled Kin off of him. A bit difficult considering how reluctant she was to let go, but eventually got free of her. "Look, Kin, I don't think my girlfriends would appreciate you hanging onto me like that. And as much as I would love to protect you, I don't think hanging onto my side all the time is a very safe way to do it." He pointed at the two obviously angry ladies who were already marching over to him. As they walked up to him, they pounced and were soon latched onto Naruto, protectively showing just who he belonged to. Yeah, they can get a little jealous. He chuckled as all three girls and surprisingly Ino, though no one noticed the latter, pouted, earning another chuckle. I see, then I will serve you in any way that they will allow me to. I owe my life and well-being to you and it is a debt that I will try to repay in full. An uncomfortable silence filled the room for the next few minutes until there was an urgent knock at the door. Shikamaru opened it since he was the closest, unoccupied person. Upon seeing who it was he casually turned to the rest. Troublesome. Naruto, I'm guessing this is who you sent for. He let the door swing open and revealed a Sandame, Kakashi, Ibiki and an oddly stressed-looking Anko. There were many wide eyes in the room, but none as open as Kin's as she started to realize just how serious this was going to be. Naruto-kun, I'm told you found something on that snake that I lost. Care to enlighten us? The old man looked around the room until his eyes fell on Kin, who he noticed was hiding once again behind Naruto as if she wanted to disappear. Naruto shifted out from his two girls and brought Kin forward. Hokage-sama, this is Kin from Oto, and I believe you would be very interested in what she has to say, but I would suggest we do this elsewhere. I have a feeling the information is something you don't want to be too public. He looked apologetically back at his friends. Ino, I want you to come along too. You have information that also needs to be discussed. Ino flinched but followed as the four older ninja lead them out into the tower. They made their way to a sub-basement where there were many seals and security measures in place to ensure privacy. Once on the level they desired, the Jonin and Hokage chose a room at random and led Naruto and Kin inside, but told Kakashi and Ino to wait outside, closing and locking the door behind them. The two genin were instructed to sit, which they did, while the adults moved in front of them. Now Naruto, what did you learn about Orochimaru, and what does this girl have to do with it? It was Kin that managed to shakily answer after bowing slightly. Hokage-sama, my name is Tsuchi Kin. I am from Otogakure where Orochimaru Sam. Orochimaru is the leader. This made all three of the elder ninja stiffen at the name. We were sent here to take the Chunin exams, but we were also given the mission to kill Uchiha Sasuke. A task which we failed miserably at. I was knocked unconscious before I had a chance to see him, but I found out later that Orochimaru gave him his 10 no Juin. Now Anko flinched the most as she instinctively pressed a hand to her neck. An act Naruto easily caught the meaning of. I don't know Orochimaru's motives in this, but from what I can guess, he wanted us to test him. And why are you telling us this? What do you get out of it? Kin flinched at Ibiki's harsh tone, but stood up before turning her back to them and lifting her shirt to let them see all the bruises and freshly patched scrapes that littered her back. She looked at them over her shoulder. What reason do I have to protect them? She asked with dead eyes. Sarutobi nodded and motioned her to lower her shirt. It sickened him that such a child could be beaten like this, but he glanced at Naruto and remembered that he had seen far worse before. Tsuchi Kin, due to your involvement in this plot you will be detained, but not until after these exams as I wish to see how this plays out. You will be supervised, and once you are finished you will be detained until we can investigate this fully. Kin nodded knowing that it was a deal she couldn't argue over. And she squeezed Naruto's hand for comfort as she settled back down into her chair. If there is nothing else for you to tell at the moment, then I believe Ibiki has some news for Naruto before we bring in the other two. Ibiki stepped forward. Naruto-san, we would like to thank you for your warning, and we sent a tale along with the one you requested, but they haven't been heard from in over 3 days. This of course leads us to believe your suspicions are correct and we are assigning them a stronger shadow in hopes to catch him in any unfavorable acts. As of now though we have no solid proof one way or another, so all we can do is sit back and watch him. Kin was thoroughly confused at that, but Naruto simply nodded. What about the other gifts I sent you? Oh, we got a nice bit of information from those two birds. It seems they really were what they seemed though, so they only knew what they were here for. It was still a big help. I'll want to talk to you later about that. Whatever you did to them before they got to us must have been impressive. One we didn't even have to touch and the other only needed a little help before she sang. Ibiki could only look at the boy with a calculating gaze as he spoke. He knew many methods of torture that could be used to get information, but they weren't taught to academy students or genin. That was a specific field that one had to go into, so how the blonde had acquired any knowledge was almost beyond his imagination. He did suspect that it had something to do with what he had told the two interrogators down in Orochimaru's lair months ago. I see, and will any actions be taken? This time it was the Hokage that answered. Because of the number of mind-altering techniques we have, namely the Sharingan and the Yamanaka clan techniques, it would be difficult for us to prove anything without physical evidence. Thus the reason for the Hyuga incident nearly a decade ago. Had they succeeded in their goals and then we caught them, then we may have been able to make a case. I'm sorry, Naruto, said Genin, just sighed, a little dismayed at the news. It's okay, Gigi-san. I'd rather them get away with what they did than have Hinata-chan have to live with that evidence. The old man nodded as he signaled for Anko to let the other two in, now that the first issue had finished being discussed. Kakashi walked in with a nervous Ino. They could tell she didn't want to be there, but she put on a brave front and sat next to Naruto. Now what is this second bit of information you have for us, Naruto? Inquired Sarutobi. Gigi-san, Kin already told you about Sasuke's newly acquired condition. It seems to have changed him and not for the better. My team and Team 8 were overlooking the clearing where the sound team was engaging Teams 7 and 10. We watched as a strange purple aura formed around Sasuke and black marks appeared to cover his skin. Once he managed to chase off the sound genin, he decided to, I assume, enact part of his ambition right there in the forest. The part 1 refer to as the restoration of his clan. He took Ino-san and Sakura-san into a hollow of a tree. What he did in there I don't know, but Ino-san can probably fill you in on that in a moment. After a couple minutes I saw a flash of blonde hair and heard a scream. At that point I knew the Tem was taking things a little too far and I decided it was time for me to intervene. He must have seen me coming and I'm guessing he decided beating me was more important since he immediately rushed out to engage me. After a brief talk of how he was going to beat me then use all the girls present to revive his clan, including Hinata-chan, Haku-chan and Harem-san, and knocking Kiba away when he came into the picture, we exchanged blows and it ended with him unconscious. Afterward Pinky, Sakura-san, rushed out to him clad in only her lower underwear and, on her way past me, she attempted to get some revenge for her little boy toy. I simply stuck a leg out which she was apparently too slow to dodge and it ended up with her knocked out right next to the Uchiha. After that short battle I entered the hollow and found Ino in a similar state of dress that Sakura had been in, so I called my teammate, along with Team 8's female members, to tend to her while I gave them some privacy. Naruto's eyes narrowed more and more over the course of his story as the hatred in his voice was easily distinguishable. He had also at one point made a threat to take the Hokage title by force, though he is far from having enough power to take such an action. See. That is problematic. Ino-chan, what can you fill in for us? They all looked to her, making her obviously very uncomfortable, but Sarutobi smiled gently at her. Take your time if you need. We can wait a little while. Naruto gave her hand a little squeeze to let her know he was still there, which sent a comforting shiver up her spine. Taking a deep breath she began. We engaged the sound ninja to try to save Sakura, who I used to consider a friend, and Sasuke, who was unconscious at the time. We weren't holding up well until Sasuke came to and decimated them. Then he picked up Sakura and myself and took us into the hollow. At first I was happy about it. But then I realized that he was just using us. Sakura didn't seem to care, but I decided I didn't want such a thing. I tried to leave. But he grabbed me. And forced me back inside. Then he threatened me and told me that if I didn't remove my clothing he would do it himself. She took a moment to gather herself up before continuing. The others in the room waited patiently just as they told her they would. With that sickening aura he had I was afraid and started to undress. Once I was in a similar state to Sakura, whose clothes he had ripped off, he grabbed me. It was just after that when he saw Naruto out in the clearing. Sasuke growled his name and rushed out of the hollow. The next thing I remember was rushing over to the next person that came into the hollow and hugging them. I could tell it wasn't Sasuke, so anything had to be better than what he was going to do. Looking back I guess I was lucky it wasn't someone else who would want to hurt me. After he got me off of him, I realized it was Naruto, and pieces of the fight came back slowly. I didn't want him to leave me, but he got the other girls to come in and help me redress. Ino had to stop as she began to cry and once again was holding onto Naruto as she buried her head in his shoulder. Meanwhile, the Hokage was glaring at Kakashi. Without looking, he addressed the three genin. Naruto, take those two back to your friends. You are to watch over them until the end of this exam. I have to have a few words with Team 7 Sensei. Everyone could easily sense the danger rolling off the man's tongue as he continued to stare the Cyclopean ninja into a corner. The genin quickly rushed out of the room, thankful to be away from the oppressive aura. As they ran the whole way back to room 205. When they got there, Naruto went to enter the room, but Ino held him back and waved Kin on, who did so although a bit reluctantly. What is it, Ino-san? To his surprise, Ino got on her knees and bowed to him. He hurriedly pulled her back to her feet and looked around to see if anyone was there to see it. When he looked back, he could see tears dripping from her eyes. I'm sorry. What do you have to be sorry for, Ino? You were the victim. It's the Tem that should be apologizing. Ino just shook her head. No. I'm sorry for being such a bitch. I'm sorry for calling you names. I'm sorry for thinking you were weak. And an idiot. And worthless. Most of all, I'm sorry for not realizing what a complete and utter asshole Sasuke was. If I could have just looked past him. She rushed into his arms once again, but this time didn't stop at hugging him. Her lips crashed into his as he stood stunned to the spot for a minute. Naruto pulled back quickly once he realized what was going on. Ino. You don't have to go that far. Listen, you're just a bit confused after a traumatic event. I'm happy that you see Sasuke for what he is now, but I already have Haku and Hinata. I don't think they would be happy knowing I'm out in the hall kissing another girl. Exactly. You have two already, so what's the problem with having another? I don't care, and neither should they since they're sharing you already. She tried to get close to him once again, but he kept her at bay. She couldn't understand it how one guy forced her to be close to him while another was now forcing her away. Listen, Ino. You're confused right now. Take some time to get your emotions sorted out and then we can work on friendship. I can't go further than that though, out of respect for Hinata and Haku. Now let's go inside and we'll have some nice company and try to get our minds off recent events. Okay. He said calmly and smiled as Ino nodded, though the determined look in her eyes made him a bit uncomfortable. Regardless, he opened the door for her and they made their way inside to hang out for the remainder of their time in the tower. Kakashi, what the hell have you been teaching your genin this whole time? Sarutobi was roaring at the copy ninja in outrage. You told us you were teaching them teamwork and knocking their attitudes out of them. If you even try to make up one of your lame excuses, I'll disband you from active duty before we leave this room. Kakashi was backed against the wall in fear. He was more ashamed of his team now than ever, but in front of the Hokage's rage none of that seemed to matter much. He knelt on the floor in a show of submission before he addressed the older man. Hokage-sama. I did everything that was in my power. From what they showed me, they were working better together, and I thought I had started to quell their emotions. Even Inoichi said that Sasuke's mental state seemed better than on his first examination, though he was astonished that it had degraded so much over the years. There was no indication coming into these exams that they were anything but a normal team aside from a few tense moments, specifically when in view of Naruto. I ask that you confirm that with your Anbu and Yamanaka-sama himself. He bowed his head again. Hokage-sama. Hiruzen turned towards the new voice and met Anko's eyes. What is it, Anko? He snapped a little harshly. Sasuke's actions could have been due to his cursed mark. It isn't something that is healthy to have. If Sakura follows his actions as much as it seems, then it would stand to reason that she is blinded by whatever he does. Perhaps she should be examined by Yamanaka-san as well. Sarutobi sighed. He knew she was right and he had unjustly accused Kakashi of being lazy. Not that anyone would have blamed him for doing so. Yes, I suppose you're right. I apologize, Kakashi, for now. If I find out you have been slacking though, rest assured you will be punished alongside your team. Kakashi gulped and nodded that he understood. Now I believe we all have things to do here. Kakashi, Make sure you team stays in line, or so help me, I'll send the three of them back to the academy if not worse. That said, the Hokage stormed out of the room, followed shortly after by the rest of them. Morning came and all of the contestants were told to meet in the main arena at noon. Until then they just hung out, played games and did some light sparring, which according to Naruto was so they won't get soft from relaxing for a day. 10 minutes until noon they made their way to the arena where the rest of the teams that had passed were waiting and got into lines according to teams. It was mostly Konoha genin including Kabuto's team, whom Naruto eyed warily. There was also the Suna team which looked a bit bored and the Odo team that seemed to be looking warily and a little pissed at Naruto. Last was a team from Kurigakure, two of which looked to be in high spirits. With only a few minutes until noon the arena doors crashed open and Team 7 waltzed in with Sasuke leading the pack. The Avenger looked around at all those present thinking on how badly he could beat each on until his eyes landed on Naruto. His fists clenched and he started off towards the blonde, but was stopped by a hand on his shoulder. He looked up into the face of his sensei and sneered. "Let go of me, I need to teach the Dobi a lesson." Kakashi glared down at his pupil in disgust. "No, I think you've taught us enough about yourself with your recent actions. Now get in line and shut the hell up, or I'll take you out of this exam myself and you'll be doing D-rank missions until you start acting like a true shinobi. That is if I decide to allow you to stay as a ninja. You can't do that to Sasuke-kun. He is the best ninja in the village." Everyone cringed at the volume and pitch of the Haruno's voice. She had apparently brought along spare clothes, most likely hoping that staying clean would impress the Uchiha. "Both of you shut the hell up or I'll remove you from this arena right now, as is in my right as your sensei. Now this is your last chance. Get in line and behave or you're out of here." Sasuke leered at the gray-haired man. "You will regret this, Hitaki, count on it." With a last huff he turned and went to the end of the rows to start a new one for his team just as the noon buzzer rang. The Hokage looked over the group in front of him and forced a smile. He had hoped the Uchiha wouldn't make it here, but that was not the case, and the presence of Kabuto was rather concerning as well. "I congratulate you all on making it to the tower on time. Now I will tell you the true purpose of these exams." The Hokage went into a slightly long speech about the politics behind the upcoming matches and how they would be reflecting on their country's strengths. When he was finished and about to send them on their ways, a sickly ninja walked up and interrupted him. "Excuse me, Hokage-sama, cough, but as the proctor of the cough final stage of these exams there is something I need to take care of first." The old man nodded to him and stepped aside, giving him the floor. "My name is Gecko Hayate and I will be your final proctor for these exams. Before we can let you all leave today, however, there is a small matter that needs taken care of. With so many important individuals coming to Konoha to watch the main matches, we would rather not keep them waiting around for more than a day if we don't have to. Since the matches will be set up in a single elimination tournament style, we are going to have the preliminary matches now in order to lessen the numbers of contestants in the main matches." Cries of outrage came mainly from Team 7 since they had only just gotten there straight from the forest. They looked the part too, as they were the dirtiest in the room, but their cries were quickly put out with a glare from their sensei, promising to keep good on his threat if they didn't settle down. If anyone feels that they would be unable to continue with the fight, they may leave now. Just raise your hand and you will be escorted to the village. Only 2 people put their hands up. One was a Kiri nin who looked like he was about to fall over any minute, the other made many in the room suspicious. Kabuto had his hand up, and was claiming that the last fight he had to go through in the forest took too much out of him and he made a show of limping away from the group. This of course didn't fool a few of those in the room, and Sarutobi shifted his eyes to a window where a hidden Anbu would be, signaling that he should follow the boy. "Well, now if there is no one else, these matches will be decided by this board behind me in a random draw. Those not participating in the current match will move to the balconies at the sides until their names are called. A match does not begin until I say, and it only ends when your opponent is dead, forfeits, or I call the match, at which point you will immediately stop. If you do not stop, you risk an automatic forfeiture to the main matches, no matter how well you did." Hayate finished his speech and looked at the board with everyone following his lead as the first names shuffled into view. Uchiha Sasuke and Akado Yoroi stay on the floor. Everyone else please proceed to the balconies. All the genin moved into place to watch her participate in the first match of the day. That's it for this part. If you enjoyed it, then like, share and subscribe for the next video, as it's going to be more interesting, and also check out my other playlists. Hope you would like them too.